What's up, guys? Welcome to the 7th episode of the Coup d'etat of Boxing, a podcast by Corruption in Boxing and myself, Official Scorecard. The Coup d'etat of Boxing is a podcast which brings you a fresh and original perspective on boxing, goes against the grain, and calls the BS out. Offers you the deep and well-thought analysis and reviews of the fights you saw or that you're about to see, and is here to bring boxing to the year 3000 like Dr. Octagon. Now, I have some big news for all of you. You know us, the coup d'etat of boxing, for not being afraid to cross over the enemy lines and for risking our lives weekly in order to give you the best possible show every Sunday. From the intelligence I gathered, a certain entity was trying to prevent us from bringing you an apologetic boxing podcast by luring corruption into their nest. I was obligated to ask for a dismantled Serbian paramilitary formation that fought Mujahedins in the 90s war for help. We are still not sure of our enemies' identities, but I think we may be onto something as we found Canelo's pictures in their wallets. We were able to rescue corruption. He's here with us at a safe house, but the paramilitary doctor is saying that he cannot allow him to stay for the whole duration of the show because he's on painkillers and needs some rest. Anyways, good evening, guys. The whole chat room, B-Space, Team Inilan, Triple JJJ, Intangible, B-Space, Justin Marshall, Corruption. How are you feeling?
Yeah, bit of a fright with the Serbian paramilitary, but yeah, pretty good spirits.
Nice to hear it. Okay, so should we start with another talk about Lomachenko versus Lopez?
Yeah, I think a great sort of place to start, first of all, would be just giving our closing assessments of the fight we discussed in tremendous detail last week. And we've seen that during the ensuing sort of 7 days, it's been a lot of discussion still, but I've always articulated the benefits of watching fights in slow motion, doing some analysis, because scoring fights in real time is one of the most difficult objectives in any sport. And that's the reason why thousands upon thousands of fights are still being contested. You know, boxing forums and YouTube channels are still discussing results which from fights 50, 60 years ago when footage was still available. So it isn't easy, especially when camera angles are not the best. Referee gets in the way. So rather than giving a premeditated or even a premature opinion, take some time, gather your thoughts, do your analysis. And if it means you're retrospectively correcting your earlier opinion, that's perfectly fine. Now, we've done the post-mortem. In fact, we've gone extremely deep. We've done an autopsy on the fight. The visual scorecard has done. His endeavors have been magnificent. He's really gone and broken down the fight in terms of doing an individual round by round fight punch stat analysis. I've rewatched the fight in slow motion just to see whether my earlier position would have changed. And before official talks about, gives a sort of a high level summary of his observations in doing the punch stat analysis. From my own assessment, you know, I scored the fight 6-6, and we did the show, you remember, the Sunday, so just literally a few hours after actually watching the fight. And I'm going to stick with that scorecard, but in sort of micro analyzing the action I saw, I must indicate that that Vasiliy's defense, you know, was excellent throughout the fight. He was still operating with a high guard, even in round 12, whereas Teofimo's hands were progressively dropping, and then literally he had no defense. And it's kind of ironic that a lot of people are very quick to assume that that the fighter who has a high guard is getting hit, whereas they cannot see the punches that is being inflicted upon a fighter who had no defense. But a lot of Teofimo's body shots that I assumed were clean, effective blows, a lot of them were not. A lot of the punches were not only low, but blatantly low, and we've taken screenshots of pretty much all of them. A lot of the punches were landing on the hip as well. The referee was facilitating the injustice by not calling those misdemeanors, warning Teofimo. In fact, it was pretty ironic. He was actually warning Vasiliy, who sometimes, after inducing a low blow, would actually try and lean forward to try and gather his breath. But the referee would intervene, stop the action, and sort of berate Vasiliy for holding, which was absolutely astonishing. Not a single warning to Teofimo. Sometimes when the referee did embarrassingly catch the low blows, he would stop the action and just say to Vasiliy, look, it was accidental when the punch was 3 inches low. So it was an absolute travesty, the injustice that he had to suffer, throughout the fight. A lot of the head punches as well that Teofimo was attempting was actually being deflected off the left glove onto Vasiliy's shoulder. He did actually a very good job with that high guard throughout the fight. Even some of the rounds that people assume that Teofimo won, especially the 12th round, is just, I'm just disillusioned with the plethora of stupidity that is just being perpetuated around. 85% of the YouTube boxing community, as well as sports writers, journalists throughout the world, and really do not know how to differentiate between a clean landed punch, a punch that is actually delivered with the knuckle part of the hand, as opposed to a blocked, deflected, or a slipped punch, or a punch that is actually hitting the high guard. Even though the force of the punch actually goes into the boxer's face, but if it's deflected to a greater extent, then it's not actually a clean landed blow. Although you can sometimes argue that the reverberation of the punch, that you can be kind and score it for that person. You don't want to really get over, just oversimplified. But Vasiliy really was fucked over in this fight. The average of the scorecards that were levied, meaning that Vasiliy didn't even win sort of 3 rounds if you take an average across the 3 judges, which is astonishing. Top Rank clearly wanted to implement not only the takeover, but a repetition of what happened in the Orlando Salido fight. But this time they're looking to change the face of Top Rank boxing and install an American-born, English-speaking, young 22, 23-year-old fighter. I think they're almost gauging that Vasiliy is probably past his prime now. Doesn't speak English very well. His body, the degradation on his body is becoming a little bit more apparent now. So it's a great time for phase 2 of their sort of business continuity in terms of installing those young fighters and trying to market and trying to mold Teofimo into a pay-per-view star. It was an absolute travesty. Maybe Vasiliy didn't do enough to win the fight on my cards, but he certainly didn't lose the fight. In some of the latter rounds, when Teofimo was actually getting hit, he was actually falling forward, so it clearly shows the damage he was taking. But the referee was very quick to stop the action. The referee didn't want Teofimo to sustain too much punishment, especially in those championship rounds when Teofimo was getting very, very close to being stopped. He was actually leaning over, sagging over, with some of the beautiful straight punches that Vasiliy was landing at short range. Teofimo had effectively said that, you know, he's not going to even fight inside the pocket with Vasiliy, taking a hell of a lot of punishment. You know, his defense was just non-existent, swinging wildly, landing low blows. In the stat count I picked 32 low blows from rounds 1 to 12, and they weren't even marginal; they were blatant. I looked at a plus minus margin of about half an inch to an inch. Anything lower than that or anything above that, on the belt line, I was actually kind, because on the belt line is actually an illegal blow as well. But I gave the benefit of the doubt, and still in generous sort of margins, parameters for Teofimo, you know, 32 excessively low punches, you know. So it was clearly had depleted Vasiliy's his gas tank. You know, on the soft tissue area, when you're looking at the punches, you're looking at you're looking at vascular organs down there, you're looking at small intestines, you know, these are unprotected organs that are just getting, you know, low blowed. And that causes a tremendous amount of pain, internal bleeding for the fighter, and for that fighter to absorb those punches and still come back and give Teofimo, you know, whooping his ass in those rounds. That's a mark of a fighter with unbelievable fortitude, determination to try and knock him out, because I guess he had to. So in closing this fight on my behalf, yeah, it was an absolute travesty. The referee's performance was just shocking. Leaves a very, very sad and bitter taste in my mouth, but I'll switch over to official for your analysis.
Yeah, okay. So first of all, I would like to clarify two things. I mean, this is not us crying about the outcome of the fight. Look, you can see, you could see this fight however you like, and perhaps sorry for the noise. Perhaps I do understand that watching it live, and that's another point that I would like to make. When I'm rewatching the fight in order to really score it, I prefer to watch it in real life, just without the sound on, because I want to have look, the judges, neither they don't have the benefit of the doubt. They don't have the ability to slow it down. But then when people started acting as if all of us, even thinking that Vasiliy may have won that fight, that we are just crying and we are sore losers, that's when I chose to do my slow-mo punch count. And look, fair enough, watching it live, it was not really easy to score the fight. Perhaps even myself, I had the impression that Teofimo was landing some of his punches. So fair enough, but my problem is with those people who are either intellectually lazy, or it's perhaps their coping mechanism that screams at you, doesn't even allow you to voice out a different opinion. So instead of trying to hear what I have to say, they're immediately gonna start acting crazy, as if I was talking some nonsense, while I'm still telling them it's all right if you thought that Teofimo won 7-5 because of his pressure. Although at the same time, I'm saying that, in my opinion, you were not really paying a close look to the punches that were landing versus the ones that were missing. Now, even the other rounds that I gave to Teofimo, in fact, you're going to be shocked, but I think that in landed punches every round, I think that in most of the rounds, Loma outlanded him. But I still gave those rounds, some of those rounds, to Teofimo, because he wasn't outlanding him in some of those rounds by much, maybe by a punch or two. and Teofimo's aggression was overwhelming, and he was way more active. And so that's why even when Loma was outlanded him, in some of those early rounds by a bit, I was still clearly giving those rounds to Teofimo. In fact, I may be wrong, but I do think personally that Teofimo only outlanded him in the first round, where he landed one or maybe two punches to zero of Lomachenko's punches. Yeah, so that's why in my film study on my own channel, I wasn't even bothering with doing the slow-mo of the rounds I give to Teofimo or clear rounds to Loma. What else is there? Yeah, but anyways, I told people, you scored that fight for myself. You either choose if you were giving all of those first 5 rounds to Teofimo because of his clear aggression, although Loma was outlanded him. Then in that case, let's give the 12th round to Lomachenko, because while Campbellbacks had Teofimo landing literally 50 punches in that last 12th round, while in fact I counted 15 punches landed for a Lopez, while Lomachenko almost doubled that with 29 punches. And sure, in that last round, Lopez did land 3 or 4 really great punches on Loma, but let's not pretend as if 29 of those Loma's punches were some weakest punches, because with most of them he was clearly snapping his head and landing really cleanly. So that's why I told people, you score it for me, because if into those early rounds Lopez was aggressive despite being outlanded, then you can make the exact same case for the 12th round in Loma's favor. He was he was being the aggressor despite Teofimo landing the single best punches of the round. And on top of that, I'm not even mentioning that he doubled the amount of landed punches. You get me? So, and by the way, that slow-mo film study, punch count, was worth making, because I'm getting the comments of some people that are upon watching those punch counts, they change their opinions. And by the way, one last point from me would be the 6th round. Watching it live, I knew it was. I mean, watching it live, I thought it was a close round, and look, I know I'm very aware of Bass commentary team, but I thought that I was experienced enough to completely ignore that. And perhaps maybe I didn't see. I thought some of Teofimo's punches landed that were in fact missing, but upon rewatching that fight, it was a clear round for Loma. So once more, I have no problem with you scoring the fight for Teofimo. But with that being said, in my honest opinion, you were not really looking at what punches were landing and which punches were missing. So that would be it for me, I think.
Yeah, and I mean, it's the case that we have detailed and a plethora of video evidence to substantiate our revisions or assumptions or actual conclusive statements regarding the fights. And the evidence is clearly out there. I would urge everybody to visit Official Scorecards, his own YouTube site, where he's uploaded, the videos and his commentary over the action. It certainly opened even my eyes to various elements of the fight. That's a habit that I always foster within my discipline of watching boxing. Actually, it's always doing my own punch analysis, because if CompuBox was a definitive, conclusive, incontrovertible method of scoring fights, then clearly judges would use CompuBox, but they don't. And the reason why they don't is because CompuBox is a system that is ultimately controlled by the networks, and it hosts their employees as well. So it's still prone to human error, but it can be manipulated, and the instructions can be levied to those employees who are ultimately there at the behest of the television network, as it was during the ESPN days as well. So it's a system that, in this sort of context, is used as a method of hypnotism, along with the commentary and the referee, who actually facilitates the instructions of the network and of the promoter, and of certainly the financial powerhouses who are actually pumping money into the fight, specifically all of the casinos, etc. So what we saw was just, just something which transpires over and over again in boxing, but the fickle-minded and the stupidity of boxing fans, who are just very easily coerced and manipulated and hypnotized. It's almost mind-blowing, and it's the reason why I really don't have the time, patience, or the inclination to interact with any of these people. Just they're clearly not on our sort of intellectual level. So anyway, that's enough of that one. Teofimo Lopez gets the victory, fine, have no problem with that. Yeah, Vasiliy Lomachenko got unequivocally, he got fucked over in the fight. So we'll leave that, and we'll get on to some fantastic action. We'll look at the post-fight reviews, and it's probably the first time and the only time I'm going to have to say this, but big shout out and big credit to Eddie Hearn for a pretty fantastic card which took place in Mexico on the DAZN USA app. Network's been struggling a little bit, but this is if you're going to put on flyweight action involving some of the best fighters, arguably guys who one day will be, in my eyes, considered as all-time greats, fighters who are still cementing their greatness in Julio Cesar Martinez, one of the most exciting fighters on the planet. He kicked things off against Moises Kakaris, 112 pounds. El Rey, who's the WBC champion, having coming off a very hard-fought and an exciting victory against the spirited Jay Harris, who we'll talk about a little bit later. Now, he didn't waste absolutely any time in disposing of Moises in just one round. A fight that I think was certainly expected to go a little bit longer, but El Rey started very quickly. An aggressive power puncher, so we clearly didn't see the full array of his skills, because he's a very fluid switch hitter as well. Great balance, does square up, but I don't think the squaring up is a disadvantage. I think the squaring up in his case is an advantage, because he has the ability to unload fast combination and hard combinations with both hands. Yes, he will take a punch, but he's got a very decent chin as well. Unbelievable combinations he throws. I like that short right hand against Moises, which followed up with a beautiful 1-2 piece. Moises never really recovered after the early knockdown, which was, I think, inside a minute or something. So not much really to say on this. Just an impressive first round TKO victory, official.
Yeah, absolutely. And Julio Cesar Martinez never fails to give us a great fight. In fact, right after the fight, I tweeted, what a deadly clan-powered buzzsaw that man Julio Cesar Martinez is. The most exciting fighter to watch in boxing, hands down. And I said not even close, but in fact, after his fight, I was reminded that Chocolatito is still boxing, and although he's not in his prime, Chocolatito is, to me, is the second most exciting, still the second most exciting fighter to watch in boxing. But speaking of Martinez, yeah, he's really amazing, and with his every punch, he's constantly throwing the kitchen sink at his opponents. His switch hitting that is really extremely useful to him, and he's unbelievably entertaining fighter to watch. So I urge everybody to watch his fights if they want to see some exciting action, because he really brings it, and he's an incredible power puncher. And like you said, corruption, yeah, I mean, it depends on certain fighters. When they square up, it may be to their benefit or not, but in his case, 99% of the times, it's very beneficial to him. And with all respect to his opponent, Moises Calleros, he wasn't anywhere near an amazing opponent for him, but Martinez was doing a great job countering him countering him with power punches for the short time that the fight lasted. Counter left hook to the body was amazing. Yeah, the first knockdown that you mentioned, it happened in the first minute of the fight, by the end of the first minute. And he scored it by countering Calleros' jab by something that he does very often, and that is jumping in with an amazing counter left hook and then straight right combo, and finishing it off with another left hook. The way he stopped him was also by countering him with vicious combos. Yeah, he's one of them who really likes to throw the kitchen sink with his counters, and to counter in bunches, not with single counters. And I always thought he's fighting as a way more offensive, more hard-hitting, more exciting, but also more careless and more physical, but also more upright version of Canelo Alvarez. Maybe not really in this fight, but it's pretty visible in his previous fights that he's training with the same people with that Canelo does, from the way he throws some of his punches, the way his stance looks at some moments of his fights, and a very similar punch selection. For example, speaking of the similarity in his and Canelo's punch selection, is like, for example, this very fight, it was when he was simultaneously slipping to the right while throwing a left hook upstairs, or slipping the other way to the left while throwing an overhand right. I mean, yeah, it was visible to me that there are some similarities, despite them not being exactly the same fighters. But I'm seeing some similarities. But anyways, yeah, so
I mean, El Rey is very anxious to move up to super flyweight, and he's gunning for Juan Francisco Estrada and Roman Gonzalez. He desperately wants those fights, and
yeah, corruption. But you know what? Sorry for
the future of 115 pounds. I would love to see a fight. You know, he's young. Somebody like him, and that even him and the guy Estrada. I think that's malfortune war of attrition, but of skill as well. It's not just two guys. It's not. I've heard some expressions about ballroom brawling for the DAZN card, but they don't really don't really understand the sort of in-ring action. They just look at the annexes of the fights. The ability that these fighters have when they're throwing power punches at velocity, but they they actually throw a lot more counter punches. If you actually sat down and looked at the analysis, like, and there's certainly in the fights we'll talk about, but Martinez as official made the assumption that a lot of the openings and a lot of the devastating punches were landing from sort of countering what Moises was doing. So these are very cerebral fighters who, and it may be a stay busy fight, but what is Martinez? How can he actually demonstrate that he's an elite fighter? Is to dispose of these people instantly, and that's exactly what he did. So this is a pound for pound top 10 fighter. Somebody who's going to get better and better, is desperate for bigger and better challenges at the money division, super flyweight. So if he moves up and people like Jay Harris move up, and eventually, Jesse Rodriguez will get to 115 as well. I've got Tanaka up there now. You can see the new injection of young fighters who are looking to change the guard at 115. So Estrada and Roman, if they have their dreams of the second fight, if they want to continue and remain supreme at 115, they're going to have their work cut out with so many impressive fighters that are just waiting and looking to cement their own legacies by beating these great all-time great Hall of Fame fighters who are fighting. So great times, official. How long do you see Martinez remaining at 112 at flyweight, or do you think by next year he would have moved up to 115?
I would not be surprised at all if he moves up to 115 soon, because he's been mentioning for a while that he wants to compete with 115 pounders, and like you said, I mean, to me personally, 115 is the deepest division in boxing with a lot of amazing talent, and imagine the addition in Jay Harris and Julio Cesar Martinez, what they would bring to that division, it would be absolutely insane. But corruption, one thing that I failed to mention, I found out on the Discord group earlier today, I think, or yesterday, someone posted, in fact, when... tell me if I'm wrong, but I think that this opponent of Martinez was a replacement opponent, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so that's right. So they asked. It's been told that the Zone and Eddie Hearn asked for Roberto Garcia if he had an 112-pounder to replace Martinez's opponent, to fight Martinez, and he told them no, but I have a 108-pounder in Jesse Bam Rodriguez, and Robert Garcia said he never heard again from Eddie Hearn.
That'll be a hell of a fight.
Absolutely.
No need for maybe Robert was just playing poker, but I can definitely see that fight happening. Maybe a couple of years down the line. I sincerely hope so. That'll be a sensational matchup. But don't get me wrong, Bang Rodriguez probably would have taken that fight, but Garcia wouldn't have authorized that. But all right, official co-main event. One of the great fighters of this era, Roman Gonzalez, was looking for his half-century, a milestone of victories. A great resurgence to his career in this sort of phase 3, coming back, having all knockout victories, one in Japan, Moises Fuentes, and Kalidia Fai. So people were just a little bit too early jumping the gun, thinking that he was finished or he should remain out of the game after the one knockout defeat to Srisakat. But for some people, a rest and resurgence, and he's had time. He had a very heavy mental blow with the loss of his trainer, who was very, very close with him. Took on that mentor role as well, even after Alexis Arguello was passing away. So it affects, bereavement affects all of us very differently. Some of us can just carry on, but a trainer is very difficult, finding that connection. He went back to Japan with Tanaka briefly, trying to find the right sort of balance, but put on an excellent performance against Khalid Yafai, won every round, and that said to me that Roman still has, a championship. He's desperate to sort of unify the belt. He hasn't done that previously, and he's very close. So it was a collision course kind of event. Roman Gonzalez and Juan Francisco Estrada on the same card, and the two victors and expected victors would meet in a sensational showdown later on. Although there was some sort of brief ramblings that Carlos Cuadras was in jeopardy of making weight and contesting this fight, and Roman Gonzalez would step in, but those rumors were very premature. So up against Roman Gonzalez, we had Israel Gonzalez, a very good fighter from Mexico. Roman was giving away 10 years, I believe, in age, 3 inches in reach, 3 inches in height, and an incredible 7 inches in reach. So a very tough opponent, and Israel Gonzalez, Jigga, who had a split decision victory in Japan against Sho Ishida, a very good fight actually. Highly competent fighter. Fought for the world championship against Khalid Yafai. Put on an excellent performance, but he wasn't rewarded with his efforts and his endeavors. Matchroom clearly had fixed the scorecard, so Khalid Yafai would remain the undefeated champion. And Roman just put an exclamation mark on Yafai when he absolutely destroyed him. So a very, very highly competitive fight, stay busy fight for Roman. But some people were actually predicting that Roman would lose the fight as well. Although they're very quick to obviously change their predictions after, but a lot of people were saying a dangerous fight, but it clearly really wasn't the case. We had some tremendous action. Israel Gonzalez actually started quite well. I like the fact that he doesn't fight tall, he actually leans down, and he was doing that very well, leaning down, sort of minimizing his height advantage, so he can get level and land sort of, straight punches without neutralizing or negating his power. That's very good fundamentals. Good to see from a young boxer. That's exactly how they should be fighting. Israel Gonzalez clearly had the benefit of hand speed. But Roman has fantastic side-to-side movement. His defense at a short range where he really had to get, try and get Israel, the taller fighter, trying to get him to smother his punches, make it difficult for him to get full extension on those punches, given the 7 inches he had in advantage. So good tactics from Roman, and his punch output was absolutely ridiculous in this fight. His endurance, his stamina. He structured the fight, I noticed, quite differently. He went for speed initially, did a great job in cutting off the ring as well, really trapping Israel up against the ropes, unloading like very, very good combinations. But for the initial sort of first sort of 3-4 rounds, Roman wasn't focusing too much on power punches. It was good punch placement, very good decoy punches. He likes to shift with that double right hand, then coming across, knowing that Israel Gonzalez has actually a really quick piston-like left hand in which he would fire. An educated left hand, he would fire free lead uppercut, then come back with the right. But Roman would just double tap him, block the punch, one on the elbow, side to side, slip the other punch. Then he'd change completely on the other side and land, a left hook, then a left uppercut, then he comes to the other side. It's just that ability to oscillate side to side from a target, from landing decoy punches to hard punches. He switches the power in one sequence from soft to hard, and the harder punches sometimes are with the left uppercut, but then he'll follow up with a straight right hand. Sometimes he'll fire the right hand a little bit lower up against the chest just to open up the left hand to change the guard position of what Israel Gonzalez was doing. But Gonzalez knew that whenever he tried to fire the uppercut, which was working, but Roman had good observation skills and defense, eventually he was actually blocking a lot of those uppercuts as well. So there is just so much going on with this fighter. The high level of skill that he exemplifies, within throwing a crazy amount of punches. There's just so much IQ. There's so much awareness. There's a tremendous amount of accuracy. He doesn't waste that many punches, although he's throwing a lot of punches, but he's varying the power between soft and hard. So it's sometimes difficult for opponents to try and understand his combinations, his sequences. So Roman is always keeping them guessing. The key for me is that his balance is just fantastic. You never see him overextend on punches and lean forward, lose his balance, so that it opens up counter opportunities. So Gonzalez, Israel found that tough as well. He kept his shape, kept his fundamentals very well. Then he started increasing his work rate to the body, landing barrage of punches, had Israel trapped up against the ropes. Israel was having some success, but his punch output wasn't too high. He couldn't really escape from being trapped up in the corner. Then eventually Israel, I think, started changing his tactics, trying to make those adjustments by using a little bit more movement, but then shoe shining, just trying to land fast combination punches. But it had no effect on Roman. One or two of them might have snapped his head back, but they didn't really deter him. They didn't slow his work rate. He kept pressing the attack. And what I really got to say is that, Israel Gonzalez has an absolutely tremendous chin, conditioned athlete as well, because he took some murderous right hands and left hooks and left uppercuts and right uppercuts and straight right hands. If he's not pissing blood or feeling the effects for a couple of weeks, then I would be shocked. But credit to him, 23-year-old. He's had a tough introduction in quite an early part, but a good fighter. But official, very exciting, competitive fight. I'd scored it 9-2 and 1 even, but a pretty dominant victory from a Roman Gonzalez, who still has so much ability, so much talent, so much skill, so much endurance. Punch resistance is there as well.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And look, it's funny that you mentioned that this fight was kind of stay busy fight for Gonzalez, which speaks a lot to the level he's performing at. because Israel is a damn good fighter, and I think that if you had such a boxer in other weight classes, he may be at top 10, but the 115 once more is so deep that that's the only reason he's not at the very top of the division. Now, I really do have a lot to say about the fight. Initially, I was surprised seeing the difference in size in between them once both of them got in the ring, because from what I remember from Israel's fight against Calleros, there was not a lot of difference in between them two. But the thing that I forgot is that Calleros himself is a damn huge 115-pounder, and is already moving up to bantamweight. So it was shocking to see the difference in size between them. And like you said, really impressive defense from Roman Gonzalez. The front foot. And speaking of his defense and mainly his balance, even when there are moments where he would stack his opponents, and his head would lean over his front foot, but the thing is, he still keeps his great balance, because he keeps his rear foot planted. He even when he's leaning with his head over his front foot, he keeps his weight on both feet, and keeps his rear foot really planted, so that way he's not pushing his body weight over the front foot. And yeah, always there in position to throw punches. Amazing. In my opinion, I saw that he lost some hand speed, although yeah, definitely he was varying his punch speed. And I would say I saw him a bit tired, so you can kind of say that he lost some stamina. But man, with the work rate that he shown the other night, throwing over 1,000 punches, it shows you that his stamina is still levels above many other younger fighters, and is still extremely good. His defense was always underrated by some, but to me, it's unbelievable that people are not seeing what I'm seeing when it comes to his defense now. Of course, he was getting hit in that fight, especially in the later rounds. But when you have a fighter with such a punching output, and that stays in the pocket for so long, it's impressive what he's able to defend from. He still has an excellent accuracy, and he could not miss with that right hand, and I'll get to it later. By the way, like you said, Israel's chin is amazing. Yeah, so especially in the couple of the earlier rounds, he showed amazing skills, defensive skills of blocking and pairing with gloves. Really some old school type of defense. It really impressed me, the amount of punches he was blocking despite staying in the pocket. And in some way, he even looks to me James Stone-esque in spots when fighting on the inside, because just like James Toney, although he's, of course, a different type of inside fighter than Toney was, he doesn't only stay in the pocket for a long time like him, but is also the most composed fighter I've seen fighting on the inside since the already mentioned James Toney. His composure on the inside with the activity that he has is amazing. Of course, we were able to see his short, sweet lead uppercut with his left hand that he's been his opponents with his whole career, like like a fisherman. So yeah, high punch output was still there. His long combos, especially those thrown while. Yeah, what I want to say is that I think that the right answer to Gonzalez's pressure is high punch output and long combos, especially when you're punching with him, which Israel did in spots, but he's that type of fighter that, especially in this fight, as we were able to see that Israel was fighting in spurts, exploding from time to time with long combos, with so yeah, he was showing the hand speed, shoe shining, and I think that Israel Gonzalez started well in the first 2 rounds, and then in the second half of the fight, he even started countering him with uppercuts to the body. That was another good thing that he was doing against Chocolatito. But earlier you mentioned Chocolatito's straight right, and to me it is a very underrated weapon of his. I'm saying it's very underrated despite him finishing many fights throughout his career with this very punch. In a sense, then, when you mention him, the first thing that comes to your mind is probably him operating skillfully in the exchanges at close quarters. His combination punching, accuracy, punch placement, head and body work, angles, footwork. But it's crazy how accurate he is with his straight right. He's really amazing at timing his opponents with that punch, and like you mentioned, him varying the speed of his punches. He can either slip in a quick counter right hand, or he can really take his time and perhaps maybe even telegraph it, but he's waiting the right time, the right move, the right opening to throw that punch, even when he throws it slowly. And the accuracy of that punch is really amazing to me. And he was landing that straight right hand the whole night on Israel, after all. Now, I scored originally watching it live. I scored the fight 11-1 for Chocolatito, but rewatching it, yeah, I could give Israel 2 or 3 rounds, but still, despite that wide score and Chocolatito being in control for the most part of the fight, there were some very competitive rounds in the fight, and it was very exciting to watch. So, yeah. In fact, yeah, I told you I would take some time because I have a lot to say. I would like to make a couple more points. So his defense, Chocolatito's defense, he's constantly switching his defense. It's very unique, you know, to have so many different type of defenses that he's showing in his fights, but are not very visible, especially for those who are not really paying attention, because some people are only seeing him fighting on the inside without realizing what he does. And he can defend by blocking and parrying, or using his head movement with his head leaning over his front foot, switching his upper body from between the front and back foot. Then he can also smother his opponents by going chest to chest or shoulder to shoulder. He can use the lateral movement as a mean of defense. He can roll punches, even using the shoulder roll like James Toney from time to time, or taking half a step back and then counter. Also, at this stage of his career, since after the first fight he had against Rongvisai, I believe that he stopped using that last mentioned move as much as he used to do.
Yes.
Meaning to step back, but it is understandable for this fight, being that he was facing a very long-armed fighter in Israel, who's dangerous when given space for his punches, as Israel often starts his attacks with straight punches in order to set up that sneaky front uppercut of his that lands with a lot of velocity. Now, 2 more things that I have to say. Sorry for dragging it so much, but I really...
No, it's some great points. Carry on.
Yeah. I just really love watching Chocolatito even at this stage of his career. But anyways, Israel, he was throwing fast and powerful combos and flurries, which he had some success with, but were not as accurate as Chocolatito's punches. However, he was throwing them to stop Roman Gonzalez when he was throwing them to stop Roman at his track and prevent him from getting off his own offense. It was very useful to him, and those punches were eye-catching, like you say, shoe-shining, etc. And some of his straight and looping rights from those combos were catching Chocolatito flush and even stunned him with one of them in the early rounds. Then in 9th and then 10th round, he caught him with some mean uppercuts off the ropes. So yeah, Israel is definitely a damn good fighter. And he's very big for that weight, but as long as he's making it, he can give help to anyone. And but I would like to make a point about Israel's defense. When trapped on the ropes in this fight, Israel was very herky-jerky with his upper body, but he became easy to time really quickly as those repetitive defensive movements became predictable real quickly for Chocolatito. He was trying to evade Chocolatito's high punch output with his athleticism of his upper body, but he was doing it one same way the most of the time, making his upper body a moving target, but without really thinking a lot, thinking about the different ways to defend from Chocolatito, or Chocolatito's pressure wasn't giving him any time to think about it. And Chocolatito's answer was going to the body and then also timing him with punches upstairs. So yeah, I saw a lot in that fight. I really enjoyed it. So despite being one-sided, there were many competitive and extremely exciting rounds.
Great stuff. Just one thing more I want to add. One thing that Roman does from a technical standpoint on the offensive side, for a fighter who has an uncanny ability of sort of switching side to side and sort of pivoting around the target, not remaining in one place. What he does is that he's not too concerned with that lead position on the outside. What he actually does is he actually splits the opponent's foot positions by planting his lead foot in between their feet. And it's that ability, that position he takes slightly on the right, that gives him that advantage of those decoy punches on the right. But then it prevents him from being actually countered, certainly with that left hand, and then he can actually shift in between, and it allows him to actually work freely, but and sort of alternate between attacks with his lead and his power hand as well. So it's kind of a sort of a unique feature that he does, but actually works very well. And when you think about it, Israel Gonzalez likes to maintain distance and range, and you argue maybe he should do. And he's actually a very good fighter who can operate laterally and throwing good straight hard punches from the outside. Just sharpshooting with that height and reach he has. He was catching Calleros fine with those punches, and Ishida as well. So for Roman to effectively have the real estate and to cut off the ring and literally trap him for 70-80% of the fight up against, on his back foot, up against the ropes, it shows Roman's awareness of the the characteristics and the advantages of his opponent, and just the ability just to keep cutting off and applying pressure, subjugating and suffocating him and taking away his advantages. So it was a very good performance. It's his milestone 50th victory, 42 or something knockouts. It's quite an amazing ratio for strawweight, light flyweight, and super flyweight. And you mentioned, official, about what he used to do before. Now, against Brian Valoria, he was up against the ropes, remaining dormant. Valoria would walk in and he just would land single left hand counters. He'd sometimes lead left hands that would actually hurt and drop Valoria. So he can be an ambush fighter as well. And there's actually so much to his ability, but unfortunately, he came a little bit too late onto HBO's radar, and at the time, we didn't really see the very best of Roman. But so I would definitely urge fight fans to go and revisit his fights in Japan under Mr. Honda's promotions. There's a lot of fantastic fights he had, very dominating performances in Japan, Mexico, around the world. But he moves forward, and so we move on to the main event official. If you didn't have anything more to add on Roman's performance.
No, that would be it. Let's go straight to Estrada Cuadras.
Cool. So a great co-main event, and a main event, a rematch. Juan Francisco Estrada defending his WBC super flyweight championship up against former WBC champion Carlos Cuadras, the Prince. The Prince, really a period of sort of indifference. Now, people talk about what Cuadras did to Gonzalez. Well, you can. I always looked at the sort of converse aspect. Look at what that fight did to Carlos Cuadras, because he was still very much in his prime. He took a systematic beating in that fight. But people just look at the facial damage that Roman suffered, but they don't really look at the in-ring action. As I've said repeatedly, facial damage is not a barometer for how a fight is going. It's not a decisive factor. Some people just have, they may have previous scar tissue, they may have high bone structures, and therefore skin which cuts up. So it's not always very simple. But Cuadras, having gone through a real period of turbulence, having lost to McWilliams Arroyo actually coming back off over a couple of years out the ring to beat a Cuadras who's had issues with performance-enhancing drugs. Clearly in the Roman Gonzalez fight, I always felt that he was his performance went to another level. You know, I've watched his career from day one, and his flurry of punches he was throwing in that fight and sustaining it up into the 12, that was something I hadn't seen before, in taking the punches as well. But he got himself back into shape in this fight. He's clearly, Canelo's chemist has clearly been working with Carlos. He's got a new haircut, looked like a mean little motherfucker. There was a little bit of bad blood between the two fighters. I don't think Estrada was too convinced with his resurgence or his transformation, but Cuadras looked good on the scales. So contrary to the rumors which were happening, when I saw the weigh-in, I was anticipating, a very good fight. And it turned out to be a hell of a war between the two Mexicans. Cuadras coming off to a great start, actually. He looked good in round one. He was finding an opening both for his right hand. His jab was landing. It was actually the wider hooks which was giving Estrada some problems. Estrada has really, and sometimes to his detriment, he's really transitioned into an attritional fighter. He really is one of the most cerebral, one of the most finest technicians in all of boxing. I think Estrada's left hand, his lead hand, the ability from the jabs he throws from a T-guard position, slightly gap in between the guard, so it's that T-guard style he throws, which allows him just a minimum recoil on his left hand, but the ability to cycle through jabs, the left hands to the body, check hooks, double up on those hooks as well. aesthetically, it really is one of the best punches in all of boxing thrown by any fighter. And we saw his check hooks was landing well. He takes that step back always, lands that check hook with precision. But sometimes he has a problem when fighters are actually doubling up on the left hand. And Cuadras was doing a lot of that in the first fight. Not as much in this fight, which was a little bit bizarre to me. But, the wide punches were definitely having an effect. And in the third round, we saw Cuadras getting Estrada up against, cutting off his space as well. When Estrada was pivoting off to his right, firing that straight right hand, we saw his head position just come off the axis a little bit, allowed Cuadras to split the guard with an uppercut and finish off with a left hook. A really fantastic little combination. Surprising because Estrada was actually doing the better work up until. But Cuadras is a big 115-pound fighter. He's not really operated at any other weight categories. Whereas Estrada's come up to a super flyweight. And Cuadras definitely looked heavier in the rehydration. So had the strength, had the power. Has very fast combinations. And it initially looked it looked like because it was a short uppercut, so Cuadras did get some power into it, but Estrada got up. He's got a fantastic chin, we know that. To me, it was a flash knockdown, because not only did he recover, but he actually won the remaining part. Well, Cuadras did have a little flurry. The commentators did get a little bit exciting, but Estrada didn't seem that hurt. It was the wide left hands that was giving Estrada problems again towards the end of the round, but he sucked it up pretty well. Estrada came back mid-rounds. His counter left hand was just working beautifully. Cuadras was just overextending, certainly with the right hand, and then getting caught with the counter left hook twice. Estrada not only goes back with the counter left, but he feints to go left, but he actually moves to the right, changes his body position over, and then fires the counter left from a weird angle, actually taking the inside position. I've never really seen many other fighters do that. Quite weird, because it would be better off with the right hand, firing the straight right, but he tends to sort of move off, I guess, to protect his body at times, but then fire that check left hook. Amazing. Really started punishing Cuadras to the body from around the 4th to 5th rounds. Counter left hooks to the body, doubling up to the body as well. Really should have been targeting the body really from round 1, I felt. Certainly with a fighter who's had, weight issues and has ballooned up in weight. I think Cuadras may have fought at 118 pounds as well, so he's kind of fluctuated a little bit. But Estrada, the key punch was definitely, in the way we were speaking live, was definitely the left hand to the body. I was just urging for that punch, and eventually when he was landing, you could see Cuadras was absolutely hurt by the punch. He was getting his right hand back, tucking in his elbows, trying to protect his liver. And a cerebral fighter like Estrada is not going to miss that. But he was patient in actually landing it. It wasn't an outright assault to the body, but he was patient, just slowly breaking him down, increasing his output, walking in with that straight right hand, actually doubling with that right hand. The right hand was actually causing a lot of damage as well. But eventually, Cuadras couldn't really sustain much domination. He had spurts, and those spurts were rescinding slowly as the punishment was being absorbed. His energy was being depleted. His mouth was gaping wide. Actually, his mouth was gaping wider than Jane Wilde's ass off that porno I saw the other day. It was crazy. Estrada in the 11th round, that's when all of the damage was done. Having one knockdown he'd suffered, but he'd pretty much dominated the fight. and in the 11th scoring, a straight right hand, left hand combination, but it was the second knockdown. Beautiful check left hand, right hand combination again, and you see Cuadras actually falling face first. Very heavy knockdown, and you knew that it was just a matter of time. And Estrada had promised a knockout. Referee allowed the action to continue after the second knockdown, but Cuadras was clearly hurt. A last little insurrection of punches, but there was nothing on his punches then. Estrada came in, 2 more punches, and Cuadras was just sagging forward, leaning forward. He was pretty much out on his feet. So a right time for the referee to intervene and call a halt to the proceedings at the end of the 11th round. And Estrada delivering as he promised, being the first man to stop Carlos Cuadras in a tremendous war, against a resurgent Carlos Cuadras. But Estrada, I don't know, official. I'm a little bit critical of some of his tactics and, not targeting the body straight off from sort of round one. But, he wanted to put on an exhibition. He's that sort of a fighter. Made it a little bit more difficult. But in the end, stopping Cuadras, stopping up, let's face it, a guy who was probably roided up more than Arnold Schwarzenegger, did a hell of a job, and great victory in the end to retain his belt and then move on to the super fight.
Yeah, so wonderful breakdown, because I'm sure that I'm not going to be able to do justice to those two guys for the excellent fight that I was watching, because earlier today, instead of rewatching that fight, I took a nap to be fresh for the show. But yeah, anyways, speaking of that fight that happened years ago between Cuadras and Chocolatito, I'm gonna shock a lot of people. Probably not you, because I'm pretty much sure we saw that fight pretty much the same way. But a lot of people who even thought that Cuadras was robbed in that fight. Well, me personally, I was giving Cuadras, in my opinion, there was a lot of swing rounds, 3 really swing rounds where Cuadras was doing great, but people are forgetting that Chocolatito was probably doing even better in those rounds. So I could see that fight going. In that fight, I could see giving Cuadras from 5 to only 3 rounds, But that fight was taxing even for Chocolatito, and like you said, for Cuadras himself, that it looked much closer than that. But it was amazing fight that any boxing fan should see if they haven't seen it yet. But yeah, the fight was extremely exciting. I think it's one of the very best fights this year. In fact, okay, probably none of those fights could fuck with Beranchyk and Zepeda. Although it's arguable, because in many of those fights, in between Estrada and Cuadras, there was a lot of non-stop action and continuity in action, unlike Zepeda versus Beranchyk. But I'm not trying to shit on that fight, because it's clearly a clear classic. But yeah, I think that seeing the pimples on Cuadras' back was a good thing, a great sign. I was thinking that we may be watching a reborn fighter, and it certainly looked that way early in the fight, because there was a lot of great action. But I think Cuadras had a great game plan for Estrada, who, in my opinion, again, I think that just like you said, he's an excellent boxer, but he sometimes admires his work too much and doesn't really work. His work rate is not really high. He's content with winning one exchange and then moving around the ring. And I think that Cuadras used that for... So what he was looking to do was high work rate, really high work rate, a lot of pressure, and a lot of punches, a lot of combos while changing the angles. It's a similar game plan that Chocolatito uses, and that Chocolatito employed many years ago, 8 years ago, against Estrada as well. And I think that he was given problems with that. Estrada is a wonderful technician and a counter puncher, but he should. I would like to see him more active in the ring, kind of like he was against Strongvisa in the rematch. But even in that rematch, I thought that Estrada's defense was not that great. He's an amazing talent and fighter, but I think that his defense is one of his weaker points. I'm not saying it's bad or terrible, anything like that, but it's not a world class, you know. So I think Estrada, first of all, we should give him credit for fighting such a crazy fight. You know, he was taking punches from a much bigger guy, just like you said, and he was able to outfight him. Now, it sucks that I was not able to rewatch the fight because you caught on many more little things that were happening in the ring, strategical and tactical things, the moves. But I saw a lot of things you mentioned, Estrada countering and then setting up punches for that left hook upstairs, or body punches, uppercuts, and left hook to the body, which, like we were able to see, was killing Cuadras. And yeah, he should have employed much more of body work for the very reason you mentioned. Now, at the same time, I would also like to give huge credit to Cuadras, who, you know, despite being probably on PEDs again, I don't know, because it was his best fight since years ago, at least from what I've seen from him. But big credit to him, because he was able to fight while being constantly tired, dead tired, for like 8 or 9 consecutive rounds, and being hurt in the process. Now, in my opinion, I do think that he would be able to nick many more rounds against Estrada for the already mentioned low work rate of Estrada. And I think that Cuadras brought up the best of Estrada in a sense that when Estrada was not really active, Cuadras was landing many more punches, but then Estrada would find an opening and land a huge counterpunch upstairs, for example, and really hurt Cuadras, and he was keeping him hurt throughout the whole fight. And that's why I think that Cuadras showed an amazing heart and chin and will for what he endured, because since from the third, fourth round on, it really looked like he was about to go down anytime. He was losing his footing, his balance. He was dead tired. You mentioned it yourself. He was breathing, you know, through the mouth, but he has that true confidence about himself, and that's why I do think that he's not that charismatic for nothing, because in my opinion, okay, with many fighters, that charisma may be fake, but with him, it really transpires in the way he's behaving in the ring. He's seeing himself as a boss in the ring, and he is willing to endure a lot. And he was fighting like a dog, despite him being bigger in size than Estrada is. And Estrada, well, all the things I said about his defense and him being dropped or being hurt a bit, but still having a great chin, he still showed such a calmness and showed that he's a real experienced veteran. Okay, he's not that old, but you see that he's 100% boxer. There's no BS with him. He's extremely skillful and experienced, because the way he was pacing himself and the way he was calm under the pressure was really impressive, you know. And yeah, and anytime he was seeing an opening from Cuadras, he was quick on a trigger to land his punches. So, anyways, great fight, and I'm looking forward to rewatch it the next day.
Yeah, in retrospect, I think what Cuadras was doing for some of those middle rounds, where he can move laterally. He's a wonderful lateral boxer with fast sort of flurries, the short sort of explosive combinations he does. In some of the middle rounds, where he was actually targeting Estrada's body very well himself. But when he started to stick and move, use a bit of lateral movement, try and distort Estrada, who was just coming a little bit too forward in straight lines at times. Estrada was like a locomotive train. He starts a little bit slow, but once he gets that momentum, then he just literally wants to steamroll you, overpower you with his punches, his combinations, and his counter punching, all in that sequence, and just keep marching until he's actually had you down. So the best way is to try and disrupt that rhythm, move laterally, get the fuck out of there a little bit, try and vary your tactics. So when actually Cuadras was doing that, he was actually having some success. And he does land those, flashy combinations from a distance, so you can definitely sway those judges. But Estrada was determined to get him out there, and he did so. So given both of their respective victories, official, now this sets up the most anticipated fight in boxing, in my humble opinion, in years. 5 since their first magnificent fight, which was fought at flyweight in Mexico. Gonzalez defending the WBA super flyweight, and Estrada the Ring Magazine and his WBC belt. That fight is definitely going to happen, I believe. For me, it is, I don't know, I'm getting an erection thinking about it now. An unbelievable fight. I think it's going to be an unbelievable war, without doubt. As I mentioned, as I reiterate, it's the most anticipated fight. It's the best fight in all of boxing. But, the boxing community are just a breed of unsophisticated, archaic individuals who don't really understand or even appreciate or acknowledge quality. They would retort and say something like, nah, man, Errol Spence and Bud Crawford, or a Canelo and Charlo, or Wilder and Fury 3, some B-level nonsense they would come out with. Boxing fans are just, boxing fans are the sort of people that if they ever went shopping in Milan at some of the greatest clothes stores on the planet, they would be looking for Levi's 501 jeans instead of an Ermenegildo Zegna, a pinstripe, or a Roberto Cavalli or a couture or something like that. If half of all of these boxing fans, if they ever had a passport made and they had the ability to sort of travel overseas, if they ever went to some of the best restaurants in Paris, where you are official, to a 5-star Michelin restaurant, they would sit down and order, and they would ask for a steak and chips. That's the level of sophistication boxing fans have, and we can continue, trying to promote this potential super fight, but it would be futile to these archaic, who just want to see some B-level B-level brawlers. But what are your thoughts on that forthcoming super fight?
Hey, first of all, the metaphors that you used, man, I'm definitely gonna make a video, a compilation of all of your punchlines. Man, I have to do it. You're so right. By the way, it reminds me of that one time as a kid when we went to on a holiday at the south of France. My mother was eating nothing but pizzas every night, while everyone else was trying seafood, etc. So it's close to home. Yeah, but anyway, it would be even now. Chocolatito, you can say out of his prime, but still amazing fighter, and he has much more left in him, as well as sorry, as Estrada now. The thing is, Chocolatito from this generation is my absolutely favorite fighter, if we do not count Pacquiao, because two of them, they are my favorites. So I'm maybe biased, but one thing is sure, I would be rooting for Chocolatito, but I'm not sure, man. I'm kind of afraid for him at the same time, because this is a 115-pound division, and plus Estrada, yeah. At the same time, yeah, he has a fucking lot to worry about when facing Chocolatito, because of those angles and all the things that Chocolatito already gave him trouble with in the first fight many years ago, or that Cuadras was giving him. It can, Roman definitely can win a lot of rounds.
Would you say that Estrada will be perhaps even the betting favorite, or widely acknowledged as the favorite going into the fight, given his momentum at super flyweight?
I would have to think about. I'm not sure, because I'm wondering who's more popular out of them two, especially in the US, where the fight is gonna take place. I don't know, man. I don't really know, but I think that the boxing community would probably give the advantage to Estrada. And look, me myself, I'm that's why I'm kind of worried for Chocolatito in this fight, because Estrada, well, his work rate, once more, I hate to bring it back again, but his work rate is not that great, but his punch placement, his accuracy is he's as accurate as Romanis, maybe even more so. But also, he would be different than many other Romans opponents who were not as precise and as accurate. And any moment, Estrada, as you could see in his last fight, could lose the fight and then find time, find the right time to land a punch and to turn out the whole flow of the fight. So that's why I'm very worried. And he, like I told you, he paces himself extremely well, while Roman, he can still throw. Even in the 12th round, he's gonna throw more than 100 punches per round, but would lose some sting, and some explosivity, while Estrada, he can keep it. He paces himself so well. He would stay dangerous for Roman even in those late rounds. He can place amazing body shots. One more thing we saw in this fight against Cuadras. So I don't know. I have no balls to give you the prediction for now. What would be yours?
It's a 50-50 fight. Estrada is a 15-round fighter fighting in the 12-round sort of modern day boxing. His stamina is incredible, but Roman showed in this fight, throwing 1,000 punches, maintaining that work rate and activity from round 1 to 12, that his stamina is and his conditioning is still very good. That is a fight that deserves a massive audience. I think Roman has gravitated to US fight fans, a lot of Mexican fans, Hispanics in America. The fight would sell out, whether it's in the United States, Mexico, even if it was in Japan, and I would love it in Japan. Estrada having fought in China before, but it's not going to happen over there. It's going to happen in the States. Vegas, that'll be a perfect place. And let's hope DAZN, they've showed a great deal of generosity to our fighters who have clearly not warranted the exorbitant paydays, and that has depleted their balance sheet and their reckless sort of financial mismanagement. Clearly, we have two fighters who deserve $1 million, deserve $2 million, deserve fucking $10 million. Multi-weight world champions, linear champions in divisions, two of the best flyweights in this era. Roman Gonzalez would go down as one of the greatest flyweights of all time. I think I think he would have given a competitive fight to Miguel Canto at strawweight. Canto was absolutely a beast, but Roman clearly has the power advantage, so that's not a foregone conclusion that Miguel wins that fight. Not in my eyes at all. He would have been competitive with Gennaro, Midget Volget, a lot of these fighters. Panea from Argentina, the former Olympic champion. So, Roman, I think would have stood up against a lot of these fighters from the past. It really is I think a once in a generation sort of a flyweight fighter. Let's hope the zone they can get hopefully they can get a massive resurgence of subscribers once this erroneous lockdown has been called off, which is causing irreparable damage to people, to the economy, when there's clearly no justification in the first place. You've got 30% of the world who are totally ignoring the lockdown. Their economies are absolutely fine. So it's just a load of nonsense. So hopefully in the early part of the year we can get this fight on. We can't wait. So that was the DAZN card from Mexico. Credit to Eddie Hearn for putting on that fight, along with Zanfer and Tekken Promotions, the main promoters. Let's face it. And we'll go back to a fight which took place last week when we were airing with our 6th episode. A fight that we did mention that we were very much looking forward to, but unfortunately the podcast we were full in force of our breakdown of the undisputed fight, so we didn't get to talk about it. But we've had an opportunity, and what a fight it was. Jay Harris from Swansea, Wales, looking to rebound from February, I believe, when he challenged Julio Cesar Martinez for his WBC flyweight 112 pounds world championship, up against Marcel Braithwaite, who was coming off defeat against Sonny Edwards. I believe Braithwaite having missed the weigh-in pretty significantly. So Jay Harris's Commonwealth Championship was not on the line. Official, do you want to take this one first?
No, I would like you to go first, because I took some notes while rewatching this fight, and I'm restarting my PC, so I'll give you.
Okay. Now, Jay Harris, orthodox fighter, had the height, but Braithwaite clearly had, the size and the power, and you could see his biceps and his triceps. So he was very well conditioned, looked very strong to me. Now, Jay Harris is a very exciting fighter, but the problem with him, which frustrated me, was that he's fighting a little bit too tall at times. He's really got to start leaning down, crouching down, protecting that chin, not using a high guard that much. So his chin is very much up in the air because he's fighting too tall with a straight back. And he's punching down, he's chopping down, certainly with those right hands. So he's not utilizing, the power which he can generate when he's rotating off his hips to actually drive into the shot. So those are clearly, technical problems that he's got to remediate. But Braithwaite, for me, in this fight was doing a good job because he's actually getting low. So Harris is not getting low as it is, but up against a fighter who's even more, bending his back, getting even lower. And he was actually fighting very well off the clinch, short explosive bursts, landing a beautiful left hand in the early part of the fight. Jay was jabbing in, coming into range well, firing, good left-right hands, quite good fast hands, left hand to the body. But Braithwaite was taking those punches, blocking. Didn't do a too good job with the left hands to the body, but doing a reasonably good job getting low, deflecting the punches. A lot of the punches coming off the top of the head as opposed to the chin. Jay couldn't really split the guard. The uppercut was open, certainly when Braithwaite was actually leaning in. But Braithwaite, very sneaky, coming off the clinch, quick explosive bursts, catching Jay off guard. Kept happening round 2, round 3, hurt Jay Harris in the third with that left hand as well. Jay, when he's not protecting his chin, not good fundamentals at times, but he's a fighter who wants to get down to war, thinks he's the bigger, stronger, harder puncher, but so he's prepared to take punches. He makes things a lot harder than what they should be. Can move around the ring very well, has actually good foot speed, good movement, can decoy left to right, can use more of the ring if he wants to, make things easier, try and sharpshoot and, from the outside. At times he was doing that, pivoting off, landing straight, left hands, right hands, knowing that Braithwaite doesn't really have a long range game. So he made it difficult. Got into a bit of an attritional war, a little bit of an unnecessary attritional war. Was shipping a bit of punishment. Definitely buzzed up a few times. But he was landing. He was outworking, Braithwaite. Better combinations, good uppercuts. Left hands began working a little bit better as well. Cleaner, effective work. Yeah, but still getting hit. Maybe Braithwaite landed probably, the heavier punches at times. For me, the scorecards were a little bit wide. It was only a 10-round fight. Maybe, I don't know, maybe a 6-4, I think, is a fair reflection for Jay, but it was a hell of a fight, a real gem of a fight that would certainly urge everybody to go back and watch. Pity there was no crowd for that fight, but yeah, it was a very, very exciting, good, decent fight. Jay Harris never disappoints, is always involved in the good fights. Very good up-and-coming fighter. He's had great championship-level experience with that Julio Cesar Martinez, but needs to improve on his defense, needs to improve on his stance, needs to improve on his tactics. So he's got to get a little bit more acute with his tactics, his ring IQ as well. Too many lapses defensively. He's not sharp enough on on the clinch, breaking from the clinch. I don't know. Maybe I don't know. Maybe he underestimated Braithwaite, thinking he was just a little bit too heavy out of shape. But Braithwaite came in there to fight, and he put on a hell of a performance. Sonny Edwards clearly showed that with Braithwaite, somebody like that, you can't just fight too much in the pocket. You've got to use a little bit of movements, maybe fight a little bit negatively at times, but that's not really the sort of the genetic trait or the modus operandi of Jay Harris. He's looking to fight on the front foot, put on the show, and you can't blame him. Certainly gave me a tremendous amount of excitement. I know Official really enjoyed the fight as well. I don't know whether you guys in the chat, anybody listening to it on YouTube, saw the fight as well. Let us know your thoughts. But yeah, great fight. But the scorecards for me, Official, were too wide.
Yeah, first of all, the chat room, give us your thoughts on the fight, because it was really exciting. And I would say that this year we had a lot of amazing 10-rounders. And this fight was definitely one of them. Really super exciting. I enjoyed it a lot. Now, yeah, Harris's defense is definitely a problem. That's the very reason I thought that he was going to get KO'd in the later stage of the Julio Cesar Martinez fight, but he really surprised us all with a great performance. But yeah, people should really watch him, and huge respect to Jay Harris for being in already 2 amazing wars this year. Yeah, because both of fights, this fight and the Martinez fight, happened this year, so it was really amazing. And he's another must-watch fighter, must see. He brings it in the ring every time. And watching the earlier rounds, first 2 rounds, I thought that he was looking like an improved fighter since that Julio Cesar Martinez fight, in a sense that his combos were looking compact, were looking sharper and quicker than I remember him for. He was also pairing Braithwaite's punches very well at the beginning and was smothering him with gloves while moving back or laterally. And was doing the same thing after getting off his own offense. But from the 3rd round on, especially the 3rd and the 4th round, his defense really started failing. He was getting hit really easy by the straight punches, mainly the straight right hand, and then later Braithwaite started catching him with a looping right hand from the inside, either from the clinch or after starting with body punches, and he was finding home for that looping right hand over Harris's shoulder very often. And like you said, yeah, I mean, he keeps that he keeps his head unprotected a lot, and he's giving away too many punches for nothing. But in his defense, he's showing a great chin, because his head was blown away by Braithwaite's left hooks a couple of times, and that visibly hurt him. In a couple of rounds, he really stunned him, but he showed an amazing chin and took his punches extremely well. He also recuperated very quickly, and shortly enough was back at throwing his own punches at Braithwaite. But huge respect to Marcel. This was my first time watching his fights. I was not aware of him at all. But yeah, Jay Harris as well, he buckled in with the left hook twice to the temple I think, yeah, I think something like that. But once more, credit to Marcel Braithwaite, who was looking to wiggle his way into short range under high guard and head movement, getting really low, like you said, before starting to fight at that short range where he was doing very well. I saw him countering Harris well when Harris was pulling away from mid-range to
Yeah.
outside, and he did that really many times while being extremely careless. And I get he was doing something that he had success with in the first two rounds, meaning that he was smothering Marcel's guard or keeping his gloves on Marcel's shoulders or neck, I mean. But many times later in the fight, Marcel was catching him while carelessly getting out of range from short or mid-range to long range. He was catching him many times with hooks and uppercuts, and also with jabs. He was landing the jab constantly on Harris, and even countering him to the body. And yeah, Marcel, huge respect to him. Such a nice fight. I was not really trying to score the fight. I was much more looking to see what they were doing in the ring. But yeah, some rounds were extremely close. Most of them, not most of them, but a big enough amount of rounds. I think Harris won on activity because he was more active, like you said, but he was not always landing cleanly. The difference is, yeah, that's something that we were talking about in the Lomachenko Lopez fight. Similar thing was happening here, where Harris's punches were not that clean, were landing on the guard, while Braithwaite was finding home for his own punches, hitting them clean. Now, yeah, what else could I say? I think that Harris showed, again, good footwork, taking back steps, making Braithwaite miss and then countering with his own jab. But a lot of times, like I said, he was getting countered with Braithwaite's jab many times in the process. And he was doing well, stopping Marcel's punches and putting away. What else? Yeah, I think especially the last 2 or 3 rounds were really amazing, great fight.
I mean, Jay Harris is still pretty highly ranked. I think top 5, still in the WBC. He may be looking to pursue another route against the Lakian, one of the other champions. I'm not sure where he's ranked in the IBF with Miruti Mitalani. I'm gonna have to look at the rankings after, but or he may move up to super flyweight. I don't know whether he's struggling to make it, but he definitely looks big for the weight. But I wouldn't move up straight away. He's got to remediate those deficiencies. Now, the countering you were talking about is because when he's breaking off the clinch or he's trying to get out or disengage from short range, he's just going back in straight lines, with his chin up. So Braithwaite is exploding, coming over Harris's lead right hand with his own left hand, but exploding almost like his feet coming off the canvas, jumping into that punch. And Harris's reflex is not really sharp enough to observe those dangers, which was kept happening over and over again. So yeah, I don't know. I really hope him and his father go back and have a look at that in detail, because up against better fighters at super flyweight, he's gonna get murdered, especially with cerebral counter punches. That's gonna be his undoing. But we'll follow the Jay Harris journey. Great little fighter from Wales. So that was the only fight we see on that card. We'll jump briefly to the Showtime card, which was in the early hours of this morning. Didn't see the main event with Sergey Lipinets, when it's consecutive days of boxing and, the paramilitary has got to come to your rescue when the wife wants to kill you. It's a wise man who has to accept that it's not going to be 5 a.m. every day and waking up at 4 o'clock in the afternoon and destroying the weekend. So discipline has got to be maintained. But in two of the earlier fights, we saw some of Floyd Money Mayweather Jr.'s prospects with conflicting results. His prospect Hawkins, who the Showtime card would just they were just eulogizing his ability, given that he had the pleasure, the greatness of sparring with a Tank Davis. So somehow that makes him a great fighter. Some crazy matchmaking going on here with Subriel, Ahmed Maxwell, Matias from Puerto Rico, a murderous puncher who, literally a murderous puncher, having been upset in his last fight. So he was looking to rebound off a defeat, and quite a surprising defeat it was. But we've seen a lot of fighters after being involved in a tragic fight, the following fight is always their most vulnerable fight, and so we don't know mentally what he was like in the fight, but it was still a tremendous fight. One of the best fights of the year, in fact. So they put him in hard against. Clearly PBC are just looking. I don't know what their plans are with Matias, but they're putting him in hard, and he was the betting underdog going into this fight with Hawkins. But clearly they may have underestimated the resolve that Subriel had, because he came out, he looked good on the scales, he looked kind of hungry, he was motivated, and he replicated the T1 101, relentless forward pressure, kind of basic. What you're going to get with Subriel. Does have a tremendous work ethic in the fight. We saw that with the Dardishev fight, who was moving so much around the ring. That was excessive running, but Maxwell was just patient. Subriel, kept patient, kept chipping away at the body, on the pivots out, on the lateral movements. But in this fight, it was power up against a kind of a nice, Hawkins is a nice boxer, picks his punches quite well, is certainly a fighter who wants to maintain distance and range, is not really too comfortable up against a heavy-handed relentless pressure fighter who's going to be in your face, cutting off the ring, cutting you down, trapping you up against the ropes. But it took a round or two for Maxwell Subriel to actually land clean punches. A lot of the punches in the first round weren't really landing with the knuckle part. A lot of hitting forearms, elbows, etc. Couldn't really find the target clean. But from the second round, he certainly did. And a massive disparity in power. And, he broke him down very, very quickly. Floyd's hype job, pretty much capitulated, and was starting to feel sorry for himself as well, shipping a lot of punishment very, very quickly. His eye began busting up as well, and it was just pretty much one-way traffic. Got dropped as well. The Terminator from Puerto Rico official Laid waste to the hype job.
Yeah, like you said, Hawkins got Subriel. But it's very funny to me is PBC's matchmaking that terrible for real, or what were they what they were trying to do with this fight? Because it looks to me like they were hoping to put Matias in the ring against Hawkins as a stepping stone. Maybe I'm wrong about it, but man, he was out of his depth. And one thing is sure, I was feeling sorry for him as well. I mean, Malik, he surprised me because from the get-go he jumped in a dogfight against Matias, and was staying in the pocket. He was trading with Matias all the time at short, mid-range. So he was trained very well, and he maybe took that first round on activity, but from the second round on, he was feeling Matias's power for real, and he's hitting like a sledgehammer. Matias. He's not a really extremely complex fighter. He can be predictable, which was shown in his fight against Anayan, who was very skilled at fighting at mid and close range, and showed a lot of great skills against Matias, who was very predictable. But like you said, that work rate, that power, that pressure from Subriel, that body punching was extremely effective. And yeah, from the third round on, I think at the beginning of every round, the doctors were checking Hawkins' eye, and at the end, I was feeling bad for him for such a beating that he was taking. But yeah, impressive performance by Matias, and I'm still wondering what PBC were trying to do with matching him up against Matias.
It's kind of interesting what has happened to him, because I thought the fight with Maxim Dadyshev was an eliminator for the IBF championship. Clearly that is not materialized, or I don't know where he quite stands in the rankings. Either it was I'm not sure whether it was a fight for the mandatory berth, but it was definitely an eliminator of some sorts. I'm not sure if you remember, official, but I definitely do. That was a fight no one really knew of, sort of, Subriel at that time. I was pretty much one of the only people who did a pre-fight sort of breakdown and analysis on that fight.
That's exactly.
But he's back in contention. The 140 pounds is another magnificent division. So many great fighters. I guess they can be patient. An undisputed championship is probably going to happen. The winner will probably move up in weight. The loser may even move up in weight. Both of them are around sort of 5'10", 5'11", so big, certainly big for 140 pounds. So the aftermath of the undisputed is going to be interesting to see if the belts get splintered out, and maybe Matias can fight for a vacant belt up against somebody, and it's not going to be an easy fight. It's going to be a tough fight. Stop this guy, you're either going to have to outbox him, or you're going to have to break his will like Anayan did the Russian, and put him under adversity, walk him down, put the pressure on him and break his will. But you're going to have to go through a hell of a lot of pain to achieve that. So yeah, we'll wait to see what happens. Now the co-main event was yet another one of Floyd Mayweather's young, highly touted prospects, but Xavier, what was his name?
Martinez.
Sorry?
Martinez.
Yeah, that's right. Xavier Martinez, 22, 23-year-old featherweight, up against Claudio Marrero, coming off a defeat against Kid Galahad. Good fighter, knocked out. I thought it was one of the biggest beasts at the time in the flyweight division at 126 in Jorge Lara, the half sort of Argentinian, half Mexican killer power puncher. But Marrero caught him with some sweeping left hands, Good fighter, good sort of flashy counter puncher, sort of keeps your hand low, sets that ambush, the traps, has power as well. So he was coming up in weight. Don't know how he was challenging Martinez in some sort of an eliminator, coming off a defeat and not even having fought at the higher weight. But that's modern day boxing for you. And this was one of the bizarrest fights I think I've seen, because clearly Marrero was supposed to be, the scapegoat in this fight to allow the young touted prospect to progress up to a title challenge. Marrero, for me, Claudio Marrero, what was he doing in the early part of the fight? He was just standing stationary, almost inviting Martinez to land those combinations. I've never seen him employ those tactics, and I quite well think he was paid to be, imitating, the Statue of Liberty in the ring. He's got so much more ability. So I don't know. I was disillusioned watching the fight. Eventually, when Marrero started applying some pressure, we saw that Martinez just couldn't handle anything. One of the most overrated prospects that I've ever seen in the last couple of years. They were talking about Martinez having, one of the best left hooks, whatever. His left hook is on par with, club fighters that I've seen. I don't know what all of the hype is about with Xavier official. Marrero having dropped him without exerting much pressure. Martinez coming back, showing a little bit of, resurgence a little bit later on. But for me, all the clean, all the snappier work, the harder punches, the better work, the better movement, the better combination punching. Great right hook off that southpaw position that Marrero throws was all done by Claudio Marrero. He was never going to get the decision in this fight, even if it landed, more knockdowns in the fight. Pretty much of a rhetorical statement, official, but Xavier gets the victory, but what the fuck were the judges watching?
Great question indeed, because it was funny. Look, this was another fight that I was just simply watching and analyzing both fighters without knowing the fight. But I saw clearly that Marrero did more than enough to win the fight, and the way he reacted and accepted the defeat clearly told me that he was there to lose. And it was funny the way they were fighting. I mean, as if someone was interrupting them during the rounds, because both of them were pretty much stationary, and then they would have some bursts, some exchanges. It was not a very bad fight, especially in the second half of the fight. It wasn't that bad, but it was just funny the way they were fighting. And I think also that Claudio Marrero, if it was not, in case it was not a fixed fight, then I don't know what the hell he was doing, because he had a lot of success with that right hook and jab, especially when he was getting Martinez's attention with his rear left hand, and then sneaking in, making him forget that front left hand of Marrero. And then that way he was sneaking in a lot of effective, clean, short left hooks. And yeah, he did more than enough to win, in my opinion, but whatever. It was a shit show.
Yeah,
As that whole card was for the exception of Matias versus Hawkins.
Yeah, that was great. Upsetting the promoter's fighter is always nice. But
yeah,
this fight, ceteris paribus, politics aside, if Claudio Marrero had been given a free license to try and to win the fight, he would have knocked out Xavier. No problem at all. Xavier's just got no chin whatsoever. But yeah, it was a pretty B-level sort of performance from this highly touted prospect. Enough of that. Main event. Didn't see the fight. I'd passed out.
Good for you.
I don't know whether you saw the fight or have any comments.
Oh yeah, yes, I have. It won't be too long, but to paint a picture about this fight, the best way to do it is to give the listeners a sneak peek to what was happening in the headquarters of the coup d'etat of boxing throughout during this card. So we were exchanging the messages, talking about the fight in between the rounds. And so when the main event came on, I wrote you, this fight was just a reminder of how terrible Lipinets is. Theoretically, you'd describe his style as a pressure fighter, but this is a pressure fighter with the least pressure ever. But I'm probably waking you up with this message because I wouldn't be surprised if you already fell asleep watching this fight, like I almost did. Yeah, so terrible, man, terrible. So not enough of clean work, especially from Lipinets. His opponent was, what was his name? Custio Clayton. He was defensive, but at least he was landing some clean punches. Not enough of clean work from Sergey. He was fighting like his whole career, fighting at one same pace, very slow pace. Not cutting the distance very well, which he has trouble cutting the distance because of his short arms. But however, there was I was seeing no urge from him to do something, to show something, fighting at one same pace. Really terrible. And I was trying not to shit on him because he's just another boxer living in the US, trying to make a living. But fuck it, man! I'm up 5 in the morning, 6 in the morning for this bullshit. Fuck it.
Yeah, enough of that waste of time. Showtime card, and let's go into something else next week, which is also a complete and utter waste of time. Yet another PBC pay-per-view. This time we're seeing the return of one of the most ill-disciplined fighters in the world, in Gervonta Tank Davis, up against Leo Santa Cruz for 2 championship belts, bizarrely enough, at different sort of weight categories. Now, Gervonta Davis his opponent is a fighter who purchased a luxury used car of not only the promoter for the fight, but the promoter for his opponent. And you don't think Floyd Mayweather has forgot that sort of past generosity from Leo Santa Cruz, purchasing, a Lamborghini. And this is clearly kickback. This is reward for Leo Santa Cruz, who I'm a tremendous fan on. He was at one point, he was on my pound for pound list. One of the best technical boxers around. You know, I've given him a tremendous amount of praise. I felt he beat Carl Frampton in both fights, and I've reiterated that numerously. For people to say Carl Frampton won the first fight is, I don't know. I just find it very difficulty in sort of retorting and listening to that sort of nonsense when they just clearly didn't see all of the body work that Leo was doing, which wasn't just scored at all. It was bizarre. But you know, he's being forced to jump up weights and fight Tank Davis, who clearly doesn't really know what weight category he should be fighting at. It's more his ill discipline around the ring and ballooning in weight, and hence forcing him to just keep moving up and up in weight. And the PBC are delaying the fight because he's clearly been struggling to make weight again and moving venues. So this fight is a case of Gervonta Davis, Leo Santa Cruz, and Floyd Mayweather sucking each other's dicks. This is homoerotic pornography in the boxing ring. This is what it is. And if any of you out there think that Leo Santa Cruz has absolutely any chance in the world of winning this fight, then you are gravely mistaken. You know, if I had the ability to sort of remortgage my 12-bedroom mansion over here in Holland and put all of the money on Gervonta Davis to win this fight, then that's exactly what I would do, and risk being homeless if I lost. I would definitely take that risk. Floyd is desperate to, we know, make Tank Davis into a pay-per-view star, and here he is headlining. You know, they're forcing Leo up in weight. Leo Santa Cruz, who is now a financial mercenary and self-deprecating as it is, but Leo admits that. You know, he's given various anecdotes saying that he fights for money now. You know, the honor is secondary. So they're clearly rewarding him by contesting this fight. But it's it's a smokescreen. It's a highly superficial matchup. It's not going to be a competitive fight, I don't think. And I don't really have a great deal of interest in watching this shit show. Any thoughts from you, official?
Yeah, a couple of thoughts. Okay, first of all, I'm going to disappoint you because although it happened years ago, yeah, you know exactly where I'm going. But in my defense, I thought Carl Frampton, and I was a huge fan of his. I thought he won the first fight pretty much clearly from what I remember. But in my defense, back then,
clearly,
yeah, like 8 rounds to finish, like that. But in my defense, back then I was not really paying that much attention to boxing and was not analyzing the fights as much as I do now. So I estimate I know much more about boxing now than I knew before. So maybe I'm wrong with that. Maybe if I was to rewatch the fight, I would come up with a different opinion. But the rematch clearly, in fact, Santa Cruz surprised me in a sense that he boxed intelligently, and it was a shutout, the rematch, a complete shutout. Yeah, but about the fight itself, to me personally, the most entertaining part of the fight should be the wait-in, where we would see if Gervonta Davis, despite sliming down quite a bit, could make the weight limit without dying, or if he's even going to bother trying to make the 130 limit in case he's over the limit. Belts. Oh, what's that? The belts from 130 and 135 are on the line, right?
Yes.
Well, another PBC's specialty. Um, Another
Yeah.
LRB
Yeah.
special, like he did again for the first fight in between Floyd and Maidana, and that's
Yes.
when Floyd, because of that move, Floyd gave him a boot in the ass before rehiring him again. But yeah, I don't know, man. Look, this fight is like telling Danny Garcia to move up to 160 and fight Jermall Charlo, a known name from a lower weight class, pretty much popular in his weight class. I mean, to a certain extent, but a known enough name that you're dragging up a couple of weight classes up. And surely this is just the case of Leo Santa Cruz saying big thank you to Al and Floyd for all the money they, I mean, especially Al, that helped him make. He even named his child after Al Heyman. Look, I get people saying this may be interesting because maybe we don't know. Tank may look really bad, maybe dying to make the weight, but still, even in the craziest scenario in which Leo Santa Cruz would be outworking him and outboxing him for 12 rounds and not get hurt in the process by a much bigger Tank Davis, do you still think it would, the decision, if he makes it to full 12, which is not very possible, do you really think he's gonna get the decision when PBC and Floyd are so desperate to make Tank Davis into a superstar that he's clearly not? I mean, just watching the titles of the videos, including Tank Davis, the recent videos, you can see Floyd Hype channel constantly naming the clips with Gervonta Davis, a boxing superstar, a boxing superstar. If he was such a huge superstar, a real superstar, you wouldn't have to make those claims again and again. So yeah, I mean, I didn't even bother analyzing those fighters. I'm not really interested in it.
You're right. I mean, the PBC trying to infiltrate us with their perpetual, repetitive hypnotism
Yeah.
around the marketing. Um, now, both of these are very talented fighters. Gervonta Davis has a great deal of ability, punching power, explosiveness, good jab. Can even out jab taller opponents at time. But there's been a lot of regression in his performance. He's a fighter who's very lead foot happy. If his front foot is not planted, he's not going to throw his backhand. So you can actually navigate and force him to square up where he doesn't actually throw any punches. And for a short fighter, he can actually fight even upright with his chin up in the air as well. So, but what he's doing now, he's not finding the correct range to unload his combinations. He's overextending. Really, he's leaning into the punches, not getting the best leverage. His balance is not as good as what I saw a little bit earlier. So I see a lot of regression, and he's been continuously bringing up fighters, Hugo Ruiz from lower weight categories and just beating them up. So a hell of a lot of superficial victories. One of the most privileged fighters in boxing. When they talk about privilege, these sort of retarded, deplorable, sort of wretched animals out there who don't really understand talk about Vasiliy Lomachenko getting privilege in fighting for championships very early, even in his second fight. But they don't acknowledge the other privileges that is going on, and certainly those that have Tank Davis has enjoyed and been gifted titles when he's won insignificant belts. He's been elevated in status. You know, when he was at super featherweight, having been elevated from the WBA regular to the super champion status when Alberto Machado beat Jezreel Corrales, the Panamanian. Jezreel Corrales having gone to Japan and upsetting longtime champion Takashi Uchiyama, who was the super champion. They specifically made or gave the super champion to Uchiyama, and then that splintered off the WBA regular championship, which was won by Javier Fortuna, who subsequently lost it to Jason Sosa, and then the belt eventually went down, and Tank Davis having won it having won the belt up against the Argentinian, I can't remember his name now, and so Machado gets rescinded, downgraded to regular status, and Tank Davis gets elevated to super champion status. So that's what happens when you have one of the most recognizable promoters and the whole stable in the whole Heyman, the PBC, Fox, Showtime, that trifecta behind you, and they can lobby, they can petition, they can get decisions in his favor, they can get him championship fights at any particular time. They can get him simultaneous championships, make him into a free 4-weight champion overnight.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, but enough of this bullshit. If you Muppets out there want to part ways with your $60 or $70, good luck to you. I'd rather spend the money on some weed and some whiskey. But we'll move on to
much better.
What else is happening on this?
What else? Let me see. Okay, so the next week we have Jaime Munguia. But Jaime Munguia versus Turano Johnson, Lee Selby versus George Kambosos Jr., which may be interesting, that Murat Gassiev fighting a brother of Seferi who faced Fury. So his heavyweight debut is finally there. So the next week.
Thank God for that.
Yeah. Then Naoya Inoue facing Jason Molani. And, of course, Alexander Usyk and Derek Chisora.
Okay. Do you want to start on any one of them specifically?
Well, I don't know, man. Munguia Johnson, I don't know. I'm not that interested into it. Kambosos Selby may be interested, but I don't have really anything to say about it. I don't know, maybe the three fights that we could mention a bit about Gassiev, his debut, Inoue, and then Usyk.
Yeah, we'll focus on Lee Selby. He's jumped up 2 weight categories. He never really had any power at featherweight, and it's going to be a difficult fight against George Kambosos, who is a good fighter. Turiano Johnson, I don't mind that fight. He's not a bad fighter as well. He's had been out of the ring a lot. He upset the Irish fighter who Golden Boy signed, but he lost to Derminchenko. Does have skill and ability, so that's not a bad matchup against Munguia, who's obviously moving up in weight as well. But we focus on Alexander Usyk, one of the best fighters in boxing, one of the best fighters in modern-day boxing I've seen. Second fight at heavyweight. Got a lot of criticism in his debut, but when a fighter is faced with so many opponents, so many cancellations, and you've not had a great deal of time to study your opponent, it's not always easy. So it took him a few rounds, but you've got to remember, Usyk wanted Anthony Joshua pretty much straight away, having, the super championship status from being undisputed at cruiserweight. But clearly Eddie Hearn has procrastinated this fight. I don't know why Usyk kept maintaining with Chisora and he kind of lost that momentum, which was disappointing to me, as I felt, Joshua was his perfect fighter to make his heavyweight debut and, to beat Joshua, as I always thought he would do. But he's had a little bit of injuries. He's, put on a bit of weight now. But he still looked good against Chaz Witherspoon. I did a little bit of an analysis on that fight, and a lot of the punches that people were saying that were hitting Usyk weren't landing at all. So I don't know what the fuck are these people watching again. But yeah, he did take some punches, and there was a little bit of facial damage, but nothing that really caused him any problems. And he's up against Del Boy Chisora now. Del is having an Indian summer. Tony Bellew's former trainer is definitely having some dividends in making him into a much better sort of pressure fighter. But if there's any problem that Jared Chisora has, it's up against fighters who can box, and the perfect blueprint for this fight is against Ajit Caballero, the Turk, the German-based Turk, southpaw, and we saw all of the problems that he caused Chisora, who doesn't have good ability in cutting off the ring, up against boxers, and Chisora is at a completely different level in his movements. So I don't know. I can see Usyk definitely having some trouble at times if Chisora is able to land those looping right hands, over Usyk's counter left hands and his backhands and his straight left hands. Chisora does like to fight those good punches, and he's not a bad fighter, so he's going to put pressure. He's going to keep marching forward. Usyk is going to have to take heavier punches. There's probably going to be a massive weight disparity between the two fighters. May even be something like 2 stone. So Usyk is going to have to be wary of the power. It's not advantageous for him to stand and trade. He's going to have to box. He's going to rely on hand speed. He's going to have to rely on movement. He's going to have to move his head. He's going to have to work body. He's going to have to sharpshoot from the outside. He's going to land those straight left hands as he was doing to Breeders in the second half of the fights, which was having some effect, to the pit of Chisora's stomach. That's key punch up against pressure fighters, just keep hitting him to the pit of the stomach. That tends to neutralize the movements coming forward. So the danger signs are clearly there. But I think Usyk is too cerebral, too much of a superior boxer, and I expect him to outbox Chisora, outwork him as well, outland him, frustrate him. I'm not sure whether he's going to get the stoppage, but I think Usyk will have too much for Derek.
Yeah, I think so too, especially in the later rounds, because Derek, he's up there in age, and it's been shown in his previous fights, not only recently, but for the past couple of years, that he really slows down in the second half. So as long as Usyk is able to, to not have to not get cut or take his punches well, he he should even stop him in the later stages of the fight, because I think Chisora may guess, or okay, it may go to decision. But yeah, I'm favoring Usyk. But with that being said, I wasn't really motivated enough to make to do a film study on both of them, as the odds were not very attractive. But you know what? Speaking of Usyk, I do think that the biggest disappointment with him are his injuries, because people are really overblowing that performance against Chaz Witherspoon. I saw that fight the same way you did. I think Chaz Witherspoon landed maybe 2-3 punches on him, but Usyk was looking extremely well for me, very very good to me in that fight. I mean, you have to keep in mind that Usyk, even before that fight, he got injured. He was away from the ring, so had a couple of injuries, his elbow, or his shoulder, in fact. The injury he renewed after the fight, and that's why the Chisora fight was pushed back a couple of times, if I'm not wrong. So Usyk against Chaz Witherspoon was doing very well to me. He was taking some time to get the rounds in, and I think he was able to stop him much more earlier, only if he wanted to. But clearly, to me, he wanted to get some rounds in. And yeah, speaking of his possible fight against Joshua, I would say that stylistically, Usyk would clearly have a lot of advantages over AJ. However, AJ is good at stepping back and countering with that pull counter straight right hand. He's very good at it, and it would be a huge danger. So I think that AJ could absolutely stop him, but still, and I'm saying all of this without having done any film study, but at least at this moment, before doing any film study, I would favor Usyk. I think he would be able to survive the fight and be aware of that right hand. Although Bellew showed in their fight how being defensive against Usyk can pay the dividends and can be very dangerous for Usyk, who, in my opinion, while having many similarities with Lomachenko is always looking better on the front foot, pressuring, maybe also because he's a shorter fighter, so he needs to get inside the pocket, while Lomachenko is looking much more impressive at short range and pressuring his opponents than Usyk does. I think at the same time, Usyk is even better than Lomachenko, much more better on the back foot. He really looks great, really beautiful to watch on the back foot, like he was doing against Glovatsky. That was an amazing performance, amazing footwork. Whenever someone is pressuring him, he's getting the best of them. That's also why even Mary's Bridis wasn't pressuring so much Usyk. I mean, yeah, he was standing there and accepting to trade with Usyk, but wasn't really that, at least from what I remember, wasn't really quick to pressure Usyk. He was making Usyk lead a lot, in fact, most of the fight, at least from what I remember. He was employing a similar game plan that Bellew was employing against Usyk, and that's why he was giving Usyk such a hard time. So I think that AJ would have the same opportunity. But this fight, I mean, Usyk when I look back at his fight against Gassiev there only landed a very few punches on him, but but he hurt him, in my opinion, in the third and then in fourth round, something like that. But again, people should not forget that Gassiev is an incredible puncher. It doesn't matter that he's a cruiserweight. He's not a middleweight man. He's a cruiserweight, and that's one division below the heavyweights. And again, even now, I think he's pound for pound one of the biggest punchers. I think that as long as Gassiev can stay injury free, he could really hurt a lot of much bigger guys, because all you have to do is look at Mike Tyson. He was very short and light at that weight class and was still able to knock people unconscious. So I don't think that people should talk too much about Gassiev hurting him, because Usyk was as well Klitschko's sparring partner for years, his chief sparring partner for the Hay fight and probably many other fights. He was boxing at World Boxing Series, World Super Series, yeah, and against super heavyweights, competing even in the Olympics at that weight class. So although the Olympic is different.
He competed at super heavyweight in 2008 before moving to heavyweight at 2012.
Yeah, right. So what I'm trying to say is that, okay, I get people saying that we don't know how he can take a punch from a heavyweight, and true that Chisora is huge. But I'm not so worried about him taking a punch. Against maybe it may be the case. You never know. Especially the problem with Chisora would be in the first 6 rounds, because I would expect Chisora not to box with him, but to bum rush him and try to impose his size on Usyk. But again, Usyk should be able to do very well on the back foot. One thing about Chisora that I saw when I was analyzing Dillian Whyte was the way he was countering with his left hook as well. But at the same time, he was countering Whyte very well with that left hook. But Whyte is an orthodox fighter, so it doesn't mean that the same thing could happen against the southpaw in Usyk. But he was doing what I liked about his both performances against Whyte was the way he was countering with left hook while moving his head back over his back foot. So that way he's evading a possible counter from his opponent while countering their counters. I'm very interested in seeing that fight and seeing how Usyk is going to perform.
And one thing Usyk must maintain through the fight is avoiding the clinches. Chisora is a master of leaning on the opponent, using the extra weight to deplete the energy. That's something Usyk is going to have to watch out for at heavyweight. It's an energy sapping tactic that a lot of these heavyweights. But Chisora is actually very good, actually fighting in the clinch. You'll hit the body, as he was doing with Kubrat Pulev, which clearly in Germany they just simply ignored. He was doing so much good work in those clinches against Pulev, and he tends to do that in all of his fights. A lot of the fighters from Eastern Europe and Central Asia are not that adept at fighting at those sort of clinches, and they tend to use their energy to try and push back the opponent up against the ropes rather than trying to use their free arm and fight out of the clinch. So Usyk has got to stay away from those clinches. Chisora will clearly have the advantage, heavier weight, more experience, better, chest to chest like that. But Usyk has the hand speed advantage. But Chisora's left hand to the body is also a potent weapon. So this fight, official, is clearly going to be a litmus test for Usyk, both in terms of what is his chin like at heavyweight, and what is his power like up against a much heavier heavyweight, somebody who's had a magnificent chin throughout the career. It may be starting to crack now. He's taken a lot of punishment, but when you can go against 12 rounds against a Vitali Klitschko, was knocked out by David Haye, who is a fantastic explosive puncher. Dillian White did him late on, but that was a little bit more due to frustration. Dillian White using his elbows, Chisora being deducted a point, was dominating the fight up until then. But with the point deductions, feeling that the fight was in jeopardy, sort of marched forward, through defense out of the ring, was a little bit reckless, knowing that he probably needed a knockout as they fucked him over, and then just walked into a left hook. So that was a little bit superficial. Had there been no point deductions, I don't think we would have seen a reckless Chisora there. But I'm not sure how the lockdown is going to be affecting Del Boy, because he clearly absorbs that energy from the crowd. If there's bad blood between the fighters, he gets energized. He loves that altercation. He gets fired up for those sort of fights.
Yeah.
And he clearly does. The crowd in London absolutely love him at the O2, etc. Having, he's from Finchley, North London, a place I know very well. So the lack of crowd, do you think that could potentially, because he's a very mentally fractious, frustrated in between fights, he can switch off, inconsistency when he's not up for fights. So clearly a lot of sort of intangibles, a lot of variables there, official.
Yeah, that is in fact a great point. To be honest with you, I was not thinking about the effect that the lockdown may have on him or on both of them. But yeah, a great point to consider. Yeah, I think it may change him for worse. And you're absolutely right. He would not have the crowd to feed off. I mean, you never know. Maybe it won't be the case, but I would say you're right about it.
All right. Yeah. So that's definitely a decent fight. I think the undercard on it has not been stacked up, so it doesn't really justify the pay-per-view status. But it's still a highly intriguing fight that will tell us a great deal about the aspirations of Alexander Usyk at heavyweight. Maybe the WBO championship that is mandatory for will get vacated. He wants to fight, Anthony Joshua for the belt, and I think he deserves that sort of fight. That's a tremendous fight.
Oh yeah, definitely does.
Yeah, but Del Boy, you're gonna have to watch out for him, because if he clocks you clean, Usyk could be horizontal on the canvas. So I think that's taking place at the Matchroom headquarters, if I'm not mistaken.
I'm not sure. Probably, I would not be
Yeah.
surprised. Yeah, just like the White fight, I would say so.
Yeah. All right, and that leaves us to Naoya Inoue, the monster, fighting for the first time under the international top rank ESPN banner. A fight taking place in Las Vegas, up against Jason Maloney, sorry.
I think it's Jason.
Jason, yeah. Andrew fighting Joshua Franco in the rematch.
Oh yeah.
Inoue, the champion of the World Boxing Super Series, had a bit of injuries too, had a bit of time out of the ring. So we'll see whether they were injuries that have, recovered and healed. Up against a good fighter, definitely the better of the two Maloneys. He gave Emmanuel Rodriguez a hell of a fight for the IBF championship, a couple of years ago, before Rodriguez went on and fought an Inoue and got, destroyed in that fight. He really gave it to Rodriguez in the second half of the fight. Good energy, good pressure, good fighting inside the pocket, short range, good hand speed, very good competent fighter. So not a bad introduction for Inoue on the top ranked ESPN banner official.
Yeah, definitely not. I mean, I'm not. I haven't seen more than probably one fight from Jason, but I would say personally, both of them brothers are not bad boxers. Pretty good boxers. But like you told me, in your opinion, that they are overrated. I would say so too. I mean, I shouldn't have any problems with him. I hoping that he healed his face, his facial bones, because that counter left hook from Donaire was really nasty. I hope that he doesn't renew his injury, that he'll be injury free for a long time, because I just can't wait to see him at this weight class and then to move up even through more weight classes, like I'm hoping to see him doing. So yeah, I mean, that's a very nice fight for him in the US. Although I'm sure we are all disappointed for him not being able to face Casimero, which again, big respect to Casimero. He's hell of a fighter, but he is clearly ducking Inoue while calling him out. Clearly took a page from Floyd Mayweather's book, and for the third or the fourth episode in a row, I'm gonna mention that the vision, the separation that these big US networks and the third-party entities, promoters, are bringing to those wonderful weight classes. It's such a shame, such a bullshit.
Yeah, if the Casemiro fight doesn't materialize, then maybe we'll have Noia up against the winner of Nordin Obali, the Moroccan, and Nonito Donaire, who are contesting for that WBC championship, which is also an excellent fight. Great clash of styles in the fight. Ubali having fought the younger brother of Noia in a tremendous fight. I think he's with MTK Global, who are promoting his career now.
Yes.
Yeah, he's a very good fighter. So that's anything is possible in that fight. So we could potentially have a rematch with Donaire, which I wouldn't be averse to seeing. He was clearly the best fight of last year, without any doubt whatsoever. Regis Prograis and Josh Taylor was also a great fight, but Donaire and it was next level, and it shows Inoue to fight for 9 rounds with broken bones, the nose and the eye socket, and almost stop a very heavy-handed fighter, a much bigger fighter, that shows the level of fighter he is to fight under, not under extreme pain, but to have those disabilities in the ring. Having he said on Japanese TV that he was literally seeing 3 donneurs for the majority of the fight, and if anybody's had a broken eye socket, you can sympathize with the predicament he had in the fight. So a good fight as well. Packed out card, a great weekend for fans to savor, with fights happening all over the place. It's nice when the fights get split between the UK and the US, especially for us in Europe.
Yeah.
Simultaneous cards are never the best. Having to play a little bit of opportunity cost, but it's clearly going to be the UK Chisora Usyk card that'll get the ball rolling, and the Inoue fights. Tank Davis, Leo Santa Cruz. I look forward to watching that the week after on YouTube.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure if there's any other cards, but I think that'll probably wraps up the previews for next week official.
Yeah, I think so. I would just add that is it the next week that Pro Grey is also on the undercard, but I'm not sure if it's in a week, the next week, or in 2 weeks. But I know that he's fighting someone on the undercard of some fight. Well, probably, yeah, it's the famous pay-per-view between Davis and Leo Santa Cruz. I'm pretty sure I saw it the last night. Yeah, but you know what? We have a new viewer, a guy in the chat room called Peligroso. He's a new to this show, at least. First time I'm seeing him in the chat room. He had a question, so we can maybe try to answer his question quickly. Can Loma regain the confidence of the sports writers with a win over Shakur Stevenson at 130? How would that fight play out? If you don't mind giving a quick thought.
At 130, if Loma is indicated that he's willing to go back down to 130 pounds, are we assuming, hypothetically, if that fight was made immediately? Yeah, I think a victory for Loma would elevate his position. Shakur Stevenson is clearly perceived at the moment as the future of boxing, certainly for those sort of weight categories, and the future of American boxing as well, having medaled in the Olympics, having been gifted the world title, fighting against his girlfriend's brother, and then we saw him in the lockdown as well, having a very, very easy fight as well. So Shakur has not really been tested too much, and I think it's a very dangerous, very, very dangerous supposition to put him in the ring with Loma on the assumption that he was outboxed and beaten, when clearly in this show we've exemplified and demonstrated and substantiated with all of the video evidence on our respective channels that it is a fool's errand to assume that Loma is now vulnerable and a young predatory lion Teofimo first Teofimo and now a Shakur Stevenson, and Loma's there to pick the bones now.
Yeah.
Dangerous fight, but Shakur is very much a boxer, a back foot boxer, but he can fight, and we're seeing his improvements. He never really had much of a lead hand when he was fighting from sort of 17 onwards, very much a one-handed fighter. with the benefit of speed, reflexes, countering ability. But he's developing, he's getting bigger, stronger. He's developed his lead hand. He's far more active with the lead hand. He's really starting to target to the body. He's sitting down with punches to the body. But it's in isolation. He's fighting up against, lackluster, pretty mediocre opponents. So he's not really had the jump up. And if you put him in the ring now with Vasiliy going down to 130 pounds, I think Vasiliy pretty much beats him up and maybe even stops him. Vasiliy is a beast. He was whooping Teofimo's ass, and had there been an impartial referee, he may have even, if he allowed, the action to continue, Teofimo Lopez would have been on the canvas or would have been stopped. I think there's clearly no doubt in that. The referee didn't want any of those fighters, and that's up against a fighter who is moving up to 140 pounds. So Vasiliy clearly has the power at lightweight, and I think he'd have the power at super featherweight as well. So that's a dangerous fight for Shakur. Two lefties, but Vasiliy could switch head as well. It's too much of. So to answer the question, I think it's too much of a jump up for Shakur Stevenson at this stage. He's not seasoned. He's not been. His chin has not really been tested, and it will be up against Vasiliy. So it's far too dangerous to put him up against a Peruvian cerebral fighter. So a little bit too premature, but eventually I think if Vasiliy stays at 130 pounds, Bob Arum, who's we've seen what he's done with Vasiliy in both the Orlando Salido fight, in which he wanted to make Vasiliy a power puncher. That's why they fucked him over in that fight, to try and get all of those amateur cobwebs out of his system. So it was a very harsh lesson that Vasiliy had to learn first of all, and he did so. And you've got to give credit to him. And they felt that his market value and his status as a commodity was in jeopardy. So hence that's why they put Teofimo over. Wouldn't surprise me if they tried to do the same with a Shakur Stevenson, but Vasiliy would definitely entertain that fight, no doubt about it. Mm-hmm. The question is whether Teofimo would step up. Whether Shakur would step up. But I don't know. Official. But for me, Vasiliy wins that fight. Whether his market value and his appeal and the way he gravitates to all of the fight fans, is that really gonna increase? I'm not sure. People have got their misguided conceptions on Vasiliy. Is either great to the hardcore boxing fans who appreciate his style, or the others are just fixated in their opinions that he's a hype job. They're never really going to understand a Ukrainian fighter dominating professional boxing, thinking that he's a privileged fighter. So people are stuck in their opinions is what I'm kind of leaning to. Is Vasiliy going to win them over? You know what they're going to say? They're going to say, Shakur wasn't ready. He's a little bit too premature. He's not seasoned. He's too green. It'll be excuses right and center. So it's not really going to be advantageous, I think, for both fighters to fight each other now. Not in my opinion.
Yeah, Corruption, I do share your thoughts because, look, I think that, first of all, many boxing fans are getting swayed away by their perception of what happened against Teofimo Lopez. So, in my opinion, it would be too early for Stevenson at this point, at this moment. Now, okay, I said something similar to about Teofimo fight, also Teofimo performed much better, but it's not, to me still, it's not Shakur, for all his talent, he doesn't represent the same problem for Lomachenko, some of the problems that Lopez was giving him. So at this moment, I would still favor Loma. I mean, Shakur, in my opinion, is a very talented guy. I was looking really closely at his skills, analyzing his skills, and I do think that he's a serious learner. He's willing to learn the skills, etc. But at this point, I would not expect that fight to happen, not yet at least. But on the other hand, Peligroso, what I would tell you is that I'm fully expecting Bob to put Loma and Stevenson in the ring at some point, but I do think that they're going to wait for it. First of all, they could they would observe the next Lomachenko's fight to see even if and when he moves down, if he took some really big punishment like people are claiming. So, and it's not all about the scoring punches, but he was definitely getting hurt, by simply stepping in the ring with a much bigger guy. So we have to wait and see if in the aftermath of the Teofimo fight, that fight is going to have some negative effect on him, and he underwent the surgery immediately after. So we have to see if Loma's body is failing down at an even higher rate than was the case up till now, because he already had some problems with the injuries. But I would expect Bob, or perhaps Todd LeBeuf, and the other people at Top Rank to put them together in the ring the moment they estimate that Lomachenko's time is over, but I don't really expect it to happen yet. So I hope it answers your question.
Yeah, I think if that fight happens immediately, it'll be a repeat of Manny Pacquiao and Keith Thurman.
Yeah.
Manny, surprising most, having maybe a significant year disadvantage. Everybody assuming that he's finished, but he turns back the clock and puts in the masterclass performance. Now, Vasiliy may not be improving, but he's not regressing, not from what I can see. Maybe the dexterity that he had in his legs is, from an attack point of view, is not as. But as I mentioned, that may be due to weight. There's a lot of upper body weight he has as well. So he's fighting clearly at a weight category that he doesn't have to cut weight. He actually has to put on a few pounds to. But depending on how long the training camp is, etc. For this fight, yeah, he had to lose weight, but he lost it very easily in very slow increments, the correct way. So 130 pounds, I think, would be perfect for him. But as you mentioned, it depends on the quite concerning frequency of injuries that he's getting, and repeat injuries to one particular, either a muscular problem, or if it's the rotator cuff, which is a concern. Certainly from his lead hand, if he's had two rotator cuff, a tear off the actual rotator, then that's an injury which is quite difficult to recover from. So we'll have to wait and see in terms of Vasiliy's comeback, how active his lead hand is going to be. hooking off it. It wasn't as much, but notice we never even mentioned Vasiliy's injury in this entire podcast, because we don't look at excuses. We judge the fight on what we saw in the ring. We start bringing in shoulder injuries and VAR not even allowing him any painkillers, then no, we don't use that. We judge the fight on what we see, two fighters in the ring. If Vasiliy wasn't in the position to fight, then he wouldn't have fought. So no excuses. But good question. A lot of variables that we don't know about. But if it's the same Vasiliy we saw, that goes back down to 130 pounds to fight Shakur, and I see Vasiliy winning that fight. But eventually Top Rank are synonymous with this changing of the guard, changing the baton fight. They've been desperate for that with, Manny and Terence Crawford. For Crawford to try and absorb his fans, because let's face it, Terence Crawford, he has the charm, the personality and the charisma of an unvarnished doorknob. So a great fighter, but an introvert. Vasiliy does have a great personality, but he's Russian speaking. So, and the US at the moment, are you seeing what's going on? They're trying to stop this Nord Stream 2 pipeline between Russia and that goes from Russia, Ukraine to Germany. So sanctions are being opposed by America. So there's a tremendous amount of anti-Russian sentiment going on at the moment. So do you really think they want a Russian-speaking fighter as the face of US boxing? Not at all. It's pretty crazy, it's a simple unilateral agreement between Russia and Germany. Russia have the gas and the oil, and Germany, the biggest European economy, clearly want to buy it, but the Americans are seeing that as somehow illegal. So the politics, the geopolitics, it happens out there. It also happens in the sports in exactly the same way. They use economic sanctions, and in boxing, they use robberies. The evolutionary ethnic discrimination that we once saw of not only black but the Italians as well. When the Italians first set sail to America, the Irish had seized political power even before economic power. They were probably one of the first racial classes to have done that. So the Italians would set foot on long voyages, finally arrive in America, and they would be subjected to IQ tests of 3 months voyages, and they couldn't speak English. They were starving, exhausted, disease-ridden, but the Irish would impose IQ tests upon them. Clearly they weren't going to pass those tests, so the Italians were in no position to pass them. They would failed. The Irish would just say, look, you got to go straight back to Italy. So we're seeing, these Eastern European fighters, these Central Asian fighters, suffering, this evolutionary ethnic and sort of racial discrimination that even, the black fighters had from during segregated America before 1964, when the civil rights, and the following year when the voters' rights became implemented. So, these guys are getting fucked over in using a bit of stealth and opaque tactics. That you can't really do it outright because of the courts system, appeal system. But they're getting fucked over. So official, I think that's pretty much my geopolitical lesson on that one.
Good one in fact. Because look, recently in these last couple of years, Americans went in a search for good, exciting fighters that they would not have to pay too much. That's how Triple G saga happened, etc. So, but yeah, I'm still expecting to see many more robberies to come. But it is what it is. Boxing is a very corrupt sport, and it often, I mean, not even often, it mirrors what's happening in the world, in the politics, in the economy. So it's just a mirror of what's happening in the world. It's a microcosm of what's happening, the racial tensions, etc. But it is what it is. That's why many of us stopped even expecting fair many of those fighters to get a fair shake. So that's why many of us are not even recognizing
Yeah,
the American
they're
boxing
clearly
establishment.
threatened.
Yeah, we are not recognizing many of those mainstream pound for pound lists, win or lose records, the official ones, because we have the eyes and the experience to recognize the real fighters and to support them. But yeah, it definitely sucks that when a fighter, no matter his racial background, is not able to enjoy the official decision that he deserves. But once more, it is what it is.
Yeah, and yeah, I think that'll pretty much conclude events for the seventh transmission of the Coup d'etat boxing. Covered a great deal. The aftermath closing statements of the Teofimo Lopez, Vasiliy Lomachenko, highly sort of controversial and just anyway. We've got a tremendous amount of boxing next week, so a lot to cover in the following week. We've got a lot of reviews, a lot of previews to do, so it should be yet another captivating, enthralling episode. So on that note, I'd like to thank everybody who took time out of their Sunday to join us. I know there's a lot of podcasts going on simultaneously, so we appreciate the hardcore foot soldiers that have showed faith in clearly what is the superior podcast in the Coup d'etat of boxing. So I want to thank all of our esteemed colleagues who joined us. We had the White Devil, we had Box. Big shout out to you, Vince. We had El Dog briefly. We had the Shepherd of Sons. We had Intangible, Timmy Neelan, B Space. Bonjour. We had Justin. Big shout out to you as well for joining us. Triple JJJ, my brethren. Hope you're well. If I've missed anybody, I apologize.
I cannot remember all the names that were in the chat room, but yeah.
And Peligros. But all of the usual suspects, yeah. And all of the others who normally join us, but big shout out to everybody. You guys know who you are. So, official, another great episode, and sayonara to everybody. We'll see you 9 p.m. Central European time next Sunday. Thank you, and adios.